Good evening, Larimer County, and welcome to our Monday evening, February 26, 2024, land use hearing. Thank you all for being here. I call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m., and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would be kind enough to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. My name is, my name is John Kafalis, Chair and Commissioner residing in District 1. I'm joined by my Commissioner colleagues, Kristen Stevens from District 2 and Jody Sheddock McNally from District 3. And also across the way, we have Tessa Beatty from the Clerk and Recorder's Office. She has a very important responsibility, and that is to record this public meeting audio as well as taking notes and minutes and all of that. We're also joined by Frank Haug, who is in our county attorney's office, assistant county attorney. Did I get that right, Frank? Yep. And then there are some other folks. But at this time, I will ask our Community Development Director, Rebecca, to introduce her colleagues and also explain the protocol, how we like to conduct these meetings. And then I'll say a few additional words and the item that's on the agenda, and we'll go from there. Rebecca, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, commissioners, and to everyone who has attended the meeting tonight. My name is Rebecca Everett. I'm the Community Development Director. Up here with me tonight are Matt Lafferty, our Principal Planner, as well as Jenny Oxmaker, our Planning Manager, and we have other staff available online and in the room. We respectfully request that all attendees please silence your electronic devices. Please help yourself to a copy of the agenda and the hearing procedure instructions, which are located on the wall just to the right of the hearing room entrance and are also posted on the county's website. Please wait to speak until you are recognized by the chair. We do ask that everyone maintain civility, refraining from any audience applause, comments, or disruptions. And please make your comments directly to the Board of County Commissioners from the podium. A portable microphone and assisted listening devices are both available if you need that. And when you do approach the board to speak, please speak directly into the microphone, state your name, and provide the spelling of your name if it's unique. For those who are attending this meeting on Zoom, you will be muted until you are recognized by the chair. If you wish to speak on the item tonight, please use the raise hand function on the Zoom control bar when the chair calls for that at that point in the meeting. If you are calling in over the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. That concludes my overview of the procedures.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. And again, welcome everyone who is here in person and certainly the folks that are participating in this public land use hearing online. Just a couple of additional comments. So we have one public hearing discussion item this evening, and that is the Windcliff Estates legislative rezoning from Estes Valley Estate EVE1 to Estes Valley Estate short-term rental EVE1S, file number 23, zone 3562. So this is a discussion item, which basically means that we will have a presentation from staff in a moment, from our community development staff, and we'll have an opportunity, the commissioners will have an opportunity to ask questions of staff, and then we'll open it up for public comment, and we'll start with people who are in the room in person. Based on my understanding of how many folks have signed up in person, and as well as Zoom, we are suggesting that you limit your public comment to about 2 minutes, please. And then once we close public comment, we will ask Matt and our community development folks to respond to some of what we've heard, but we also want to extend an invitation to the folks from the Windcliff Estates Property Owners Association. There are a few folks in the audience to give them an opportunity to have up to 5 minutes to be able to respond to or rebut some of the comments that have been heard. So that's how we'll do things. And my understanding that there are at least 3 folks here, Sharon and a couple of other folks, Bob and who is the other person? Richard? Rich. Thank you. And so what I'd like to suggest, please, respectfully, is that when we get to the rebuttal of the public comments, you folks can come forward, introduce yourselves, and then collectively you'll have about 5 minutes to respond to what you've heard. So, with that, I'm sure that's as clear as mud, is it? So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our community development folks. I think our principal planner, Mr. Matt Lafferty, and if you would be kind enough to offer the presentation, the staff presentation. And again, folks, just so you understand, we receive a rather robust packet, 100 pages or more, that include all the information from the Planning Commission meeting, from the Estes Valley Planning Advisory Committee meeting. So we have all of that input, plus the variety of emails that we've received from last year, this year, in addition to what we've received most recently. So we do our best to incorporate all that input and do our best to make an informed decision on this legislative rezoning proposal. So with that, we'll turn it over to Matt. Thank you for listening, folks.
Thank you, Chairman Kafalis. You just took all my presentation. I'm done. Not really. But I was going to say that the packet tonight consists of, the entire packet consists of this application for the Windcliff Estates legislative rezoning. It starts at page 2 on your packet and goes all the way through to page 105. I did put some supplemental emails that I received in the last 2 days on the dais this evening, so you have an opportunity to look at those. There is a brief staff report starting on page 2 that just outlines the history of the application, and the more intuitive or detailed staff report starts at page 29, and that was a staff report that was presented to the Planning Commission earlier this year. So with that, I'm going to get the presentation started. This application comes to us as a request by several of the property owners in the Windcliff Estates development up in the Estes Valley planning area. It comes to us as a legislative rezoning. A legislative rezoning is a little bit different than a normal rezoning in that a request is made by members of the community that the county consider filing a request for rezoned property. And in this case, it was requested, and the Community Development Department agreed that we would process the application and move forward. As a legislative item, there is no true applicant. The county is just processing the application. This item on tonight is known as item number 23-zone 3562. It consists of a rezoning application to change the zoning classification for a piece of property known as the Windcliff Estates. I call it Windcliff, I don't know why, from EV E1, which is Estes Valley Estates Zone District, to EV E1S, which is the same zone district as the previous, but the S add-on has an implication as to what type an additional use that could happen in that zone district, which is short-term rentals, and that's what we're going to discuss here next. So on the screen, you can see that both zone districts are listed here. For the most part, the EV1, the E1 Estes Valley Estates Zone District reads identical to the proposed EVE1S, with the exception of the last sentence in the paragraph, which is underlined in this case, and it reads, "And it allows for short-term rentals to be exempt from the residential cap and from the separation requirements." And I'm going to explain a little bit about how we got there and what all that means. So if you all recall, last year...
And Matt, respectfully, may I ask you to talk a little bit closer to the mic, please?
Yep, not a problem. I'll scoot over and turn in. Never was good with these mics. Is that better? Okay, thank you. So last year and a little bit of the previous year, Larimer County entered into a process of looking at modifying the short-term rental regulations for Larimer County. And that was to look at the entire county from the standpoint of how short-term rental regulations would be applied to properties in the county, unincorporated parts of the county. During that process, it was identified by the residents of the Windcliff Estates that there were two parts of those regulations that they were not in favor of. One of them came prior to the regulations that we were talking about, and that was when the county and the town of Estes worked together on short-term rental regulations for the Estes Valley, and we created a cap. And that cap consisted of how many short-term rentals would be allowed within the Estes Valley area, both in the incorporated and the unincorporated area. Right now, there's an allowance of 266 in that cap, of which out of that 266, there's 2 available by virtue of some applications did not get approved here recently, and so they're being handed down to the next people that are in line, and there's a substantial line in place for people that are trying to fill that gap. If, for instance, tonight you support this application, that number of 266 will be reduced by the number of approved short-term rentals that exist in the Windcliff Estates development, which we gauge to be somewhere around 57 or 58, which means that the cap would drop for the rest of the valley area to 209 short-term rentals. So that's the first issue. So when that came up with the Estes Valley, the town of Estes and the county, when we were adopting those regulations, they put that cap into place. It affected everybody in the Estes Valley, including those that live in the Windcliff Estates. That's part one. Part two, I think, is a separation requirement. When we adopted our regulations last year, we included into the regulations for all properties in Larimer County a separation requirement that said if you're going to have a short-term rental in a neighborhood, because we didn't want it to become inundated by a number of units, we were going to create a situation where if you get an approved short-term rental in one location, it cannot be within a certain distance of another short-term rental. And I believe that was 200 feet, something like that, 500 feet. I'm sorry, I don't know the number off the top of my head. Windcliff Estates also felt that that wouldn't work for their community, and they didn't want it to apply to their community because they already had a substantial number of approved short-term rentals in their neighborhood, and they felt that given their covenants, which we're going to talk about in a minute, that they shouldn't be subject to those same separation requirements by virtue of the longstanding history they have within their neighborhood. So, having said all that, during the adoption of our regulations, it was determined that we would create this EV-E1S zone district, not as a given to anybody, but as an opportunity for other neighborhoods in the area to come forward and explain why they think they shouldn't be subject to the short-term rental regulations as we adopted them with a residential cap and a separation requirement. And so what that means is that each neighborhood or an area could come in and apply and say, we don't think that those things should apply to us because of various factors. And then the Board of County Commissioners, through the public hearing process, could determine whether or not they agree with that or not. If they do, it gets approved and those 2 requirements go away. That doesn't erase any of the other requirements of a short-term rental. All the other requirements still remain in place. They still have to go through an application process with the county. They still have to get our approvals and demonstrate that they comply with our regulations. It just removes those 2 requirements. So, where we stand tonight is that the people of the Windcliff Estates, a majority of them, came in and requested this change. And we've processed it through, and they have submitted on pages, or just following the initial staff report, a proposal that says these are the reasons why we think that we should not be subject to these regulations. They've given a history of their situation. Their situation started back in the 70s when Windcliff Estates was established. they were granted covenants for their neighborhood, and those covenants allowed for the transient use of properties up there. And so they used those covenants as an opportunity to allow houses in that neighborhood to be rented on a transient level, short-term level, less than 30 days. And that's gone on since the 70s. That was not a valid use of county regulations until 2000. And what happened in 2000 was when the county adopted and came to an agreement with the town of Estes that we would have an intergovernmental agreement and we would allow the town of Estes to process applications in that area. The town of Estes regulations did allow for short-term rentals, and so they began approving some in this neighborhood. And so there are some that were legitimately approved between 2000 and when we modified our regulations. So there's not a given. There is some nonconformities. At some point, the county said, yep, the ones that are there in the Windcliff Estates are either grandfathered in and properly registered, and so we acknowledge the 57 or 58 that are currently there. They're not illegal. They're not, they're all registered. They all have valid approvals. So moving forward, I would just like to show you the map. As with any of these legislative rezoning applications, we have to adopt a new zoning map if you choose to approve the zoning. The map is on the screen behind us. It illustrates a light brown area where my cursor is right here, and that's the Windcliff Estates, and that brown color represents the new zone district. So if tonight the Board of County Commissioners chooses to approve this application, you'll have to make a second motion, and that second motion will be to adopt this as the official zoning map for the Estes Valley Planning Area. As with all applications in Larimer County, the Land Use Code suggests that we need to address our applications through a series of review criteria, and the Board of County Commissioners needs to either find that that criteria has been satisfied or that it's inapplicable. And I'd like to just spend a few minutes and discuss each one of those criteria so that you know where staff is coming from and understand what the criteria is. So criteria 1 talks about compatibility of surrounding uses, including those that are in the development. This criteria talks about the proposed change in the zoning is compatible with the type, intensity, character, and scale of existing and permissible land uses surrounding the subject property. It talks about dimensional limitations, meaning the style of and size of lots that are in that district, and that the development will be consistent with the physical character of existing and permissible uses in the surrounding the subject property. Generally, we're looking at one piece of property. In this case, we're looking at the area in a subdivision and around the subdivision. So in response to that, from a staff perspective, this is a highly subjective question. You could answer this any number of ways and not probably be inaccurate. It's a matter of opinion. And so staff felt and still feels that this type of addition lies most appropriately with the Board of County Commissioners to make judgment as to whether or not you find that it's compatible with the surrounding area. So we chose not to make a recommendation on behalf of the county with this application. And so just to show the confusion on this, on the surface, I wrote in your staff report, on the surface, the zoning change does not change the type of uses permitted, meaning the types of uses that are permitted in this development are residential uses. They're all going to be houses that are built. It's how that house is going to be occupied, whether it's going to be a long-term resident, more than 30 days, or permanent resident, or it's going to be somebody that's more of a transient person that comes and goes on based on a short-term rental situation. I don't think that it's going to change the scale or the character of the neighborhood from the standpoint of if you were just driving through it, are you going to notice anything drastically different than what would happen if this wasn't approved? However, I've heard from people, and some have said, and this came up during the short-term rental regulations as well, when we were adopting them, the change does not allow for the potential intensification of short-term rentals in the area. So for some residents, intensifying the number of transient rentals causes a disruption to their neighborhood. They don't see that as creating a cohesive neighborhood, and they prefer to say that that changes the character and the style of their neighborhood. On the flip side of that, that might be a true statement. Others might suggest that the occupancy of a residential dwelling by transient guests is not an issue of incompatibility. It still is a residential use. It's just being occupied by people on a different time frame. And so that's really a subjective matter, and staff did not feel comfortable making a recommendation regarding that. Item number 2 in the review criteria, does this proposed change address a demonstrated community need or otherwise results in one or more particular public benefits that offsets the impacts of the use? It goes on to say that including but not limited to affordable housing, senior care housing, childcare, things like that, recreational opportunities and whatnot. Again, staff believes this is a highly subjective question. On one case, you could say that allowing short-term rentals in an area that is highly used as transient recreational opportunities, Estes Park, people just go there to visit, is a positive thing, and it supports the local economy up there, and it provides a basis for additional lodging that's not available throughout the year. And so it increases the lodging availability to people that are going to come to visit that area. Others might say that it provides no tremendous value or public benefit. It's all a benefit to the property owners, and it takes away other opportunities and uses of housing, whether that's for workforce housing or other long-term housing needs that might occur in the area. So again, that's a subjective criteria that you will need to weigh this evening. Change of circumstances. Is there a circumstance that changed that caused this to become an issue up here? You could say that adopting the current regulations for short-term rentals was a change that changed the circumstances, but we applied that standard across the entire county. It's not like it was labeled to one particular neighborhood or one group of individuals. So that change of circumstances, there's nothing really that's changed in circumstance up there that would cause somebody to say, yeah, all the other housing opportunities or lodging opportunities in the Estes Valley disappeared by virtue of some situation, and we're the only ones left to do it, and that's change of circumstance. So staff believes that, again, that's something that you should weigh in on and consider. Is there adequate infrastructure? That's item number 4 on the criteria list. In a rezoning application, we generally don't consider infrastructure availability as a big issue. It's not that we ignore it. What we do recognize is that each one of these, if you approve this application, each application will have to come through the county and get approval. And at that time, it's going to have to stand on its own merits as to whether or not there's good access, whether the water's good, whether the sewer's good, is there adequate fire protection, those types of things. And we'll evaluate it at that time, rather than trying to evaluate an entire neighborhood. We'll evaluate it as that comes forward. Our county engineering department did note, though, to tell us that in their referral comments or in your packet, that we do know the Windcliff Estates area, and we do know that some of the roads are steep and narrow and could present a problem. And so we're not saying that that's going to present a final decision, but it certainly will impact the ability for people to get permits up there. And so we want people to leave, if this is approved, with the understanding that they have to get an approval, and that approval is going to be subject to the standards, and we already know that some of those standards may be difficult to meet. So they may not just be a carte blanche type of an approval. Natural environment, does the proposed change result in a significant adverse impact on the natural environment? In this case, no. It's just a bunch of houses being built. They're already there. The majority of them, new houses, can be built there today or tomorrow. That's not new stuff that's coming on. I don't know that the occupancy of the residents is going to change whether or not there's an impact on the natural environment. And then lastly, is there any additional criteria in a growth management area that would apply to this? And we no longer have a growth management area approval with the town Estes, so that criteria does not apply. Just to give you an idea, this is legislative rezoning. We had to post the zoning map that I showed you, as well as additional information at a public place. We posted it 2 places in the town Estes, one at Town Hall and one at the Parks and Rec building up there for 60 days. It's actually 30 days in advance of the Planning Commission hearing and then 30 days in advance of your hearing. So those have been posted and available for the public to view and comment on. In addition to that, we did do our typical notice on the website. We also included it in a newspaper of general circulation. It's been put on the website for the Windcliff HOA, and we notified people within 500 feet of the boundaries of the Windcliff subdivision, as well as everybody inside of it. So public notification was rather extensive, and we covered all of it, hopefully very well. So with that, because of the subjective nature of the proposed application, the Development Services team's not going to offer a recommendation. However, we would offer this. The item was presented on November 16th to the Estes Valley Planning Advisory Committee, and at that meeting, they took testimony from staff as well as from the public, and it was received a unanimous vote of approval, 4-0, by that PAC. In support of the application. The application was then presented on January 17th of this year to our Planning Commission, and our Planning Commission did the same, took public testimony and heard from staff and weighed the circumstances and offered their deliberation. And in doing so, a motion was made to approve, and we had an equal number of people there that night. The motion did not pass because there was a 3-3 vote. That 3-3 vote nullifies that and really leaves you with no decision on behalf of the Planning Commission. I would say that the dissenting opinion of the Planning Commission that evening was largely on a fairness issue. They felt that, why is this an issue that is appropriate to grant this group a way to deviate from the standards when you couldn't deviate from it anywhere else in the county without doing this? And how does that impact people that are directly adjacent to the development? Meaning if I live next door to the development, I'm subject to a certain set of regulations. And if there's a short-term rental in the Windcliff Estates and I'm not separated by it by a distance, I wouldn't be able to even apply, or I'd have to appeal as part of my application. So there was some opinion that was drawn on that. Whether you acknowledge it or recommend it or agree with it is really just a matter of opinion. So with that, I'm going to close my presentation by saying there is 2 recommendations you can make tonight. There would be, of course, the recommendation to approve. If you approve, we need to also approve the map. If you deny, then it's just a recommendation for denial, and we don't have to act on the map amendment. And when the time does come, I have those motions. We can set them on the screen for you. With that, I'll answer any of your questions. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Matt. And again, it would be helpful if people talk as close to the mic or increase the volume on the sound system. So thank you for your presentation. This would be a time for the 3 of us to ask questions, provide some feedback, or particularly ask questions. Colleagues, Commissioner Shattuck McNally, please.
Mr. Chair, I have several questions. May I ask them all, or would you like me to ask a few and then give you?
Why don't you go for it?
Thank you, sir. So Matt, I have a few questions. Just want to clarify a few things, but I took some notes, and I've been taking some notes after reading all of this over the weekend and everything. So I just want to clarify, this does not change the amount of fire mitigation and defensible space and the evaluations. I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I'm just clarifying because I think also the public needs to hear this, because I think you had made a statement earlier that changing the zoning just gives us carte blanche. Everyone can do whatever they want in this zone, and I've heard that. And that's concerning, there's that public perception. So my first question is fire mitigation. Do future applicants or reapplying for licenses have to go through this fire mitigation and defensible space and understanding the urgency and the fire risk in that area?
New applications will have to conform to our land use regulations. So fire, roads, access, all the things that would normally go into a typical development review application are going to come up. Site lighting, things like that can be looked at. With those that are already approved, I don't believe that they would have to go back through the process. They've all been registered and gone through some level of process already. They're already there and existing and registered.
But they may not have the same robust and important fire mitigation as the new applicants. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Also, will the current applications or the current short-term rentals still have the application that they can only transfer once and then do that in the next 10 years? Does that apply to all of them, or is this legislative rezoning also exempt them from that new regulation?
Again, the new ones will have to comply with that. I can't remember how we went with the second ones.
Yeah.
Can you help me out with that, Rebecca?
Yeah, let me weigh in on that. So the EV1S zone district, really the only difference in that zone district would be that short-term rentals would be exempt from the 500-foot separation requirement, and from I'm sorry, hey Matt, would you bring back
The cap.
the cap, thank you. Lost it for a second. The cap and the separation requirement. So all other requirements that apply to short-term rentals, all of the infrastructure, roadway, fire mitigation, as well as that transfer, limitation on transfers, would apply to any new applications in Windcliff or in any other part of the Estes Valley.
So potentially, by approving this, if we approve this, this whole neighborhood could become a short-term rental. Every house in that neighborhood, potentially, if they pass through all of the other things, could become a short-term rental because they would not have to have the cap or the distance requirement.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so my next question is, to that criteria slide, does this application have to meet all those criteria to be approved?
The way the code is written, it says that the Board of County Commissioners shall consider an application based upon these criteria, and that you shall find that it meets these criteria or find that the criteria is inapplicable. So if you find that, like for me, item number 6 says that additional review criteria in a growth management area has to be adhered to. Well, there is no growth management area, so it's clearly not applicable. But if you said adequate infrastructure was not applicable at this point because that's going to be addressed at some future point when an application is submitted for an individual use, then you could say that that criteria is inapplicable and it's not part of your decision-making process.
Or if we want to say, I don't really know if this is really a public benefit or a community need, because this is really a need for the residents of that community, that would be something you said subjective?
That's something that you can use in your deliberations as to whether or not you want to approve or deny, or say that that's an inapplicable criteria.
Okay, this is a gated community, correct?
I don't believe so, not that I'm aware.
Okay, I'll ask the applicants. And then also, I'm glad you brought up the equity issue, because that is something that someone called and asked me about, because not everyone has the means or the structure to organize and have paid representation to come organize. So other neighborhoods don't have that same kind of equity issue because of the certain neighborhoods of means can kind of maybe lobby for certain regulations to benefit for them financially versus other neighborhoods wouldn't have that. So that would be something, this process, I'm curious, is a application time and money, and I'm assuming it costs some money and time to do this?
Yeah, that's true.
Does it matter? I'm seeing Frank shake his head. No?
That's true for every application in Larimer County. It's not just this one. So if there was another neighborhood or another group of people that wanted to make an application such as this for their area and come up with the justifications for that. And they would pay the fee and submit the application, and we would determine whether or not we're going to process it or not, yes.
Okay.
So there's a fairness issue that others can apply for it. But this is only, Commissioner Shattuck McNally, this is only for the Estes Valley Plan area. These two criteria, or this zone district doesn't reach outside of that to other parts of the county.
Okay. And then my next question is, when the road and bridge talked about some of these road and height and clearance away, road grades, which is certainly something that we have heard from other neighborhoods about, those coming that are not from mountain communities, are not used to driving in snow, mountain roads. We were pretty clear that these certain areas in this neighborhood probably are going to have trouble meeting some of that criteria. Is that correct, as you've been working to this application?
Yeah, that's our understanding, given the history that we have in that neighborhood with our engineering department. Tracy Shambo happens to be online if she wants to chime in. But we didn't do an evaluation of the neighborhood. There might be houses and properties that will not have any difficulty meeting the standards, and there might be others that are in other parts of it that are. And until a specific application is submitted that shows us the layout of the road, we do a site visit to determine, how accessible it is, what are the grades, turning radiuses, things like that are out there. We can't guarantee that there's going to be any kind of an approval or compliance with our regs.
Okay, I think that's all the questions I have for now. Thanks for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens, do you have any questions?
I just have one thing that you had commented on is other communities in the Estes Valley could apply for the same type of zoning. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So when we're talking about a fairness issue, I mean, other communities are welcome to apply. And if you can remind me, when we were first, talking about this, I mean, this zoning district was created because we had heard from this particular community that they had allowed this since 1970. And so this was a way to accommodate a use that had been happening in their community for, I'm trying to do the math. I should know that's
50 years.
I'm about that old. 50 some years. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I have.
And Commissioner, if I may offer an addition there, there are other zone districts within the Estes Valley, the accommodations zone districts that allow short-term rentals and other types of accommodations without separation requirements or caps. So if this community were rezoned to the EV1S, it wouldn't be the only community in Estes that allows a lot of short-term rentals potentially. It would just be the only one with a residential zoning that's applied to it.
And part of that is because when we went through this, one of the things that came up was, well, you're going to allow a bunch of hotels and motels to move into these areas, but the way that this zoning is written, you can't have that. It has to stay residential. And that was something that came up at the Planning Commission, was comments about, it's going to allow hotels and motels and things like that. This zoning district, if it was approved, you can't have hotels and motels, which is different than some of these accommodations districts. This one would be a strictly residential. You'd still have essentially single-family houses. They'd just be operating as a short-term rental.
Do they have anything like a bed and breakfast or something, or it would strictly be short-term?
I think it's just.
We changed the term bed and breakfast to
Sure, sorry. I
bed
don't
and
mean to-
breakfast inn, and that goes in the accommodations district or other districts. But we do allow a hosted short-term rental, which is not subject to all these requirements, but they do have to meet certain short-term rental requirements, but they're not considered a short-term rental.
And then just one last question. So each short-term rental still has to, while technically every house could be a short-term rental in this neighborhood, they would all each have to go through their own approval process.
That's correct.
So they would all be judged individually. And so if there were if there were concerns about certain, not meeting requirements, that criteria, but we're not
We're not judging that
looking
tonight.
at that criteria. We don't even have any evidence that points to that tonight. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I'm good, thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Stevens. I have a few questions, Mr. Lafferty. Let me collect my thoughts a little bit. So regarding the two exemptions, if we were to support the rezoning, it would basically, everything else would apply when one applies to be a short-term rental. I have a question specific to that, but the latitude perhaps would be that the 500-foot separator would not apply in the Windcliff Estates, as well as the cap. So my question regarding the cap is this, maybe there are two questions here. And that is, it is my understanding that there are approximately 57 currently operating, give or take, short-term rentals. I said approximately, up or down, short-term rentals operating in the Windcliff Estates subdivision, the various filings, and that would reduce the overall cap, the Estes Valley short-term rental cap of 266 by approximately 57. Is that correct so far?
That's correct.
It's
That's correct. And there was total, and Amy just clarified some stuff for me in my text. So there was a total between the town and the county, there was a total of cap of 588. Of that 588, 266 were going to be in the unincorporated areas of the county. That cap would be reduced by the number of them that are in the Windcliff Estates today, and then that would become the new cap
Thank
for the
you.
remaining portion
Frank,
of the
did you
area.
want to comment on
Not
that?
including that. So anything new in the Windcliff Estate wouldn't count towards the cap.
Or anything new in the Windcliff Estates would not lower the cap?
It would,
Just the ones that are there?
that's correct.
And I think it's worth maybe
Okay.
talking about this just for a second, because it was another issue that was at Planning Commission came up a lot. And I think there was maybe some confusion. But the cap that is in our code is in section 13.6.1.c.4, which is the part that talks about 266. My suggestion to you all, if you were to approve this, would be to say that the rezoning is conditioned on the cap being lowered by the number of existing lawful short-term rentals in Windcliff. And this got sort of convoluted, but the point is that if this were to be approved, there's not gonna be a bunch of available short-term rental licenses now. It's gonna be the same. There's not any new ones available, because the ones that are in Windcliff would then be exempt. But let's say there's 57, right? So if you have 266 and there's 57, then you would say, now you subtract 57 from 266 and you get 200 and,
So,
I didn't.
so Frank, that's really important and helpful. So moving forward, if we were to adopt this or approve this, it means that the new cap would be 266 minus what currently exists in Windcliff. And so who can do the arithmetic? 266 minus 57?
I think it's 209.
209.
What's that?
It would be 209 if there's 57.
So moving forward, the cap overall in the Estes Valley would be 209 maximum short-term rentals, subject to all of the application requirements, life safety, and everything else. Is that correct so far?
Yes.
And the only way that cap can change is if the commissioners decide to adjust it in one way or the other. Is that correct?
That's correct. And when you read that section of the code, it says that cap is supposed to be reviewed annually anyway. And so the board is supposed to look at that anyway. And it says in the code, you're supposed to do it in April. but you could do it anytime you wanted. But I think what would need to happen is you would, again, depending on how you go, if you voted for it, you'd say conditioned on the cap being lowered by the number of legally operating short-term rentals in Windcliff, and then it would be lowered by that number.
And why, Frank, forgive me, I don't want to belabor this too much, colleagues. I hope you'll bear with me for a bit. Why do you feel like there needs to be a sort of a condition of approval to make it clear that that cap would be reduced by the current number?
I don't think that you probably have to, but I think it's important to just be clear about what the intent is, so that if anybody later is confused or wants to sort of argue about it, we can say the intent is to not have all of a sudden 57 more licenses available in the rest of the Estes Valley. The intent is to allow Windcliff to rezone without increasing the number outside of Windcliff that are available.
So that, Commissioner, did you want to help me out?
Well, the only thing I want to say, but Windcliff could have more.
Yeah,
Oh,
Windcliff
So
of course.
could.
Windcliff can
Yeah.
have more, yeah, that, it's just that the 57 that are existing go towards the threshold that's existing now.
For the-
because that's
for the valley.
Right, right.
Oh,
That's
good.
right.
That's-
I just wanted
that-
to make sure that that wasn't, that cap, I mean, that's the whole point here, is the
And-
cap that wouldn't apply to Windcliff.
Right.
And I think that's an important clarification, but it also speaks to another point that I wanted to make, that, you know, there are different opinions about the role of short-term rentals in Estes Park, as well as the unincorporated parts, the Estes Valley. And so there would clearly be implications. Approving this rezoning, thereby lowering the current cap, still allowing for more short-term rentals in this community, but it would ultimately lower that cap, and therefore there would be less short-term rentals that, unless we increase the cap in the valley. Is that correct? And that has implications that speaks to concerns that some may have regarding too many short-term rentals in the valley.
I think,
Or is that a stretch, Rebecca?
I think the intent in structuring that way was to acknowledge the current condition, that currently there are 209 short-term rentals outside of the Windcliff area, 57 within the Windcliff area. If the Windcliff Estates rezones to EV1S, then those 57 are no longer part of the bigger pool. So it's just trying to equalize numbers to represent the existing condition, not necessarily change upwards or downwards how many short-term rentals could exist in the rest of the valley.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's also very helpful. Just a couple more questions or comments. One is, let's see, there was a reference to, I think Commissioner Shattuck McNally helped make it clear that any new short-term rental applications would have to go through the normal process. The other things that are in the current short-term rental regulations that were adopted June 1st of last year would apply. I didn't hear reference to, the transferability thing came up and things like that to family members, I think, and to the 10-year thing, one-time transfer. But I don't believe I heard anything about every 2 years or whatever it is, every 5 years. Could you help with the inspection piece of it and the relicensing or recertification piece? Would that apply?
Yeah, so for any new short-term rentals that are approved in this area, as with elsewhere around the county, they would be required to relicense on a 2-year cycle. And they would be required, for any new short-term rentals, they would be required to meet all life safety requirements up front before they could get their initial license, and then every 2 years would need to relicense, and if there were any life safety concerns, address those as well.
Thank you. Maybe one last question for now, and that is, give me a moment, please. I wonder, Matt, if you wanted to comment, but regarding one of the review criteria, change of circumstances, number 3, it seems to me what's driving this whole application is a rather significant change of circumstances. and that is that we updated the land use code to reflect certain things that would make it very difficult for any additional short-term rentals to occur in this neighborhood. So isn't that a rather significant change of circumstances?
Commissioner Falls, Chairman. Yeah, you can look at it that way. You could also look at it from the perspective that these regulations did not apply to anybody in the county until we adopted them, and now they universally apply to everybody. So they were uniformly adopted, and it's not a change that was specific to this neighborhood. I'll remind you, and this is just a matter of fact, covenants are not something that Larimer County implements. We don't initiate people's covenants. So your covenants could say you could have certain types of uses in your neighborhood, but if they're not authorized by our zoning district, they're not permitted. And so there's been, out of a 50-year history, 30 years that it was just operating without people knowing, and then 20 years where they were getting approval through the town of Estes. So is there really a substantial change that was happening here? That's a matter of opinion. And I think, again, that's where the subjectivity of this application comes into play.
That's a very diplomatic answer. Thank you. Maybe one last question. What the heck? And that is, normally we would have the applicants give a presentation. We don't. It's a kind of a different situation. It's somewhat new. I wonder, Matt, and I pose the question for future reference, could you speak a little bit about the process that ensued in the neighborhood in 2023 regarding the neighborhood, the community meetings on this topic, and the involvement of the neighbors, the surveys that were conducted? Can you speak to that at all, objectively?
I think I would leave that to the property owners to explain that. I wasn't part of those conversations, so I'm not familiar with all of them, and I don't want to give an incorrect answer.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that's fine. It's just that it's a bit of an unusual situation in which we normally would have the applicants present on things like that. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think that's an important part of the equation as we try to discern this.
Yeah, and I do know that during the adoption process, we did have some public outreach that invited the whole public in the area to come and talk to us. And it was during those processes that we discovered some of this information. I think there were a couple of other meetings outside of that in which there was some engagement on behalf of the community to talk about this neighborhood in specific nature, but I wasn't part of those. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, sir. Commissioner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to clarify one of your previous questions. You asked about the life inspection and renewal, or the renewal, and that does not apply to the current 59 that are already there. They won't have to do that process. Is that what we're saying?
No, anything that's already has received a short-term rental license from the county would be required to relicense every 2 years.
Okay.
There may be some, and we could get into this level of detail if you need it, but there may be some that were non-conforming vacation homes, or that had licensing under different regulations where maybe there's a unique situation related to how often they need to relicense and all that. But we really are trying to get every existing short-term rental out there on the same 2-year renewal cycle. So for the most part, that's the case.
That was my questioning, because thinking that, everyone else is on this cycle, that we have, this is another circumstance where this neighborhood would have something unusual and special to it, and make more efforts for the staff having to monitor. And so that's another reason why I was asking that question. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me ask that question.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that, Commissioner. Anything else, colleagues? Then I believe now we can go into the public comment portion of this hearing. And as I indicated earlier, we do have a sign-up sheet, and Jenny can manage that. We'll ask the folks who have signed up in the order that they've signed up to please come to the mic. Have about 2 minutes to offer your public comment, Identify yourself for the record if you have any affiliation, and also spell your name if it's not clear on how to spell it, or hopefully we have it on the sign-up sheet. So, let's begin.
Yeah, so we'll start with those joining us in person in the room, and then we'll go to those joining us online. So I'm going to read off the first name, and then I'll also read off the second name, so the second person can just be ready to come up after the first person is done with their first 2 minutes. So we'll start with Don Darling, and after that will be Lisa Joslin, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name. So Don, come on up.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. Appreciate all the information. Really appreciated your commentary. My name is Don Darling, and I have been a property owner in Windcliff for 20 years. I first moved into my first home that I built up there in 2006, although I bought the property in 2004. I have lived in 5 homes. And I have built probably 15 homes, of which there are some customers here that are living in homes that I built. So I've done multiple additions and remodeling projects, probably easier to walk around pointing at homes that I have not been in. I have changed light bulbs and batteries for smoke detectors for some of my aging neighbors. Sounds weird, but I think it's important to know that it's my neighborhood. And I really like every one of the people that live up there. I am working currently to remodel a home, to do some work so that it comes into compliance for a larger rental. And that's right now in response to your comment, ma'am. And so I made a few notes that there are some requirements that require updates on properties, and I'm involved in helping with some of those. They require sprinklers, they require ADA access, things like that. I actually talked with Wileen Buser in 2007. Her and her husband, Don, purchased that property up there in the 60s. And the history is that okay, so
No, I'm just, I'm hoping that someone's tracking the time, but intuitively, I'm thinking we're getting close, Don, and I really want you to have the opportunity to share your thoughts, but I also want to be fair to all the others, so.
you bet. Okay,
Please,
let
sir,
me
thanks.
run down through here. Windcliff has tremendous services other than natural gas. And we also, it is not a gated community. We have our own our own employees that manage and care for the road, and they do snow removal, things like that, because that came up. It's also a fire-wise community. We have a committee that is actively involved working with different agencies to take care of that. And these are responses of things that I heard you talking about. And there are very few properties near Windcliff. That was a comment that came up. And so I am in support of this because it's really not a change of anything that is taking place over the last 50 years in Windcliff. Being a property owner for 20 years, I have not been negatively impacted in my experience in living up there. I don't expect that it's ever going to be 100% of people that rent there, at least from the last 20 years.
Thank you very much,
You're
Don.
welcome.
And Jenny, is it correct that you or someone is tracking the time?
Yes, the time actually shows up in the corner of the screen.
In the corner, which corner? Oh, up there. What?
Mr. Chair, I don't believe you can see it because it's right behind the speaker. There it
I
is.
can pull it over.
Actually, I can see
If we'd prefer
that.
this.
Remember, my hearing is not the greatest, and certainly the things behind the logo, the brand, are not helping. Thank you.
Hi.
So we'll reset and welcome. Please be kind enough to introduce yourself, and thank you for being here.
Hi, my name is Lisa Joslyn, Joslyn. I don't come to you as a Windcliff resident nor a homeowner that rents their home. I work 7 years at the Windcliff Homes Property Rental Management Company. This business has been operating since 1970, which I think has been said a few times. My plea and hope for the rezoning to be approved tonight is basically to be able to continue to be the best representative for the community. We, myself, my colleagues, and the owners, Rich and Deborah Chappie, have been there for the residents, guests, and homeowners that rent their homes. They trust us to take care of their homes. We have taken care of their things during the fires, floods, pandemics. When the fires were coming over, we had to call and communicate with all the guests and get them out of there. We had people shutting down the homes to make sure that pipes and things weren't breaking. So if the rezoning doesn't go through, Windcliff will be totally a different community without the gatehouse, as many of the community members call us. We represent the community like no other. Without the rezoning, we will lose owners in the program, and our office will eventually not be able to operate. Losing our jobs and the ability to help many people come to Estes and stay in beautiful homes that we offer. They come to spend their money in our town and our county. We wouldn't be able to pay our sales tax because there wouldn't be anything to pay the sales tax. With the rezoning, it would enable us to continue working and providing what we love to help people come and enjoy what so many have for over the 54 years, views, homes, hospitality from the awesome staff that I've been the privilege of being able to work with. So thank you for your time and consideration for the rezoning of Windcliff.
Thank you for your public comment, Lisa.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Next up, we have Dawn Stevenson, followed by Jamie Stevenson.
Thanks, Jenny.
Evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I can hear me okay. My name is Don Stevenson. My wife Jamie and I own a home at 1924 Windcliff Drive. We have also been residents in Windcliff for over 20 years, and we support the rezoning. I thought maybe I would offer a perspective on the change in circumstance question, maybe by looking at the purposes for regulating short-term rentals, because there are good reasons to regulate short-term rentals. And I think one of those, which I'm sure you all considered, is preservation of neighborhood integrity, which is a laudable goal. You know, short-term rentals mushroomed after Airbnb was established. I looked it up. It was in 2007. And I thought that, you know, in 2007, Windcliff had been offering short-term rentals for 36 years. And we've been offering them through that gatehouse, which is on site, which mentioned and which is still operating and which still manages most of the short-term rentals. And by the way, of which historically, and others may speak to this, about 33% of our homes in Windcliff over the many, many years they've been offered for short-term rentals without any caps or limitations have been short-term rentals. It really doesn't exceed that. Others may speak about a life cycle that we sort of have there, but I want to be quick. We've always been a thriving, successful short-term rental community, and I think that the irony, and I think this irony was recognized by you on the commissioners earlier by establishing this zoning category, is that what is good for some neighborhoods and preserves their neighborhood integrity may undermine other neighborhoods in different circumstances. And in this case, I think the point that we would like to make is that Windcliff being a successful long-term short-term rental community will be undermined by these regulations and would be greatly helped, and in fact would be a community good if the zoning could be approved, and we certainly hope that you will do that. Thank you for your time.
All right, Jamie
Thank you, Don.
Stevenson is up, followed by Judy Pete.
Thank you, Commissioners. Like my husband said, we've had a home for
Tell us
20
your name. Tell us your name again, please.
Jamie Stevenson.
Jamie.
We've had a home in Wincliffe for 20 years. We first found out about it in 2002 when our family was unable to find a cabin at the Y camp for several years. There's 7 of us. We have 5 children. So someone told us about Wincliffe. We were able to rent a house there, ended up buying it. That was only possible because of the rental program, and it was on site. They took good care of our house. We felt confident, and we were able to offset the cost. Wincliffe has always accommodated people who wanted to take advantage of the Y camp. It's right across Tunnel Road, but maybe their dates didn't align. They do not have very many cabins for larger families, and Wincliffe was able to provide more accommodation for those people. We look forward to sharing our home with other families like that. We ended up selling our smaller home, breaking ground on a larger home with lots of bunk beds. We have 5 grandchildren now. But unfortunately, we broke ground 2022. And so we are caught not being able to rent our home under the new requirements. And so thank you for hearing us. We hope you will approve this.
Thank you, Jamie.
All right, Judy Pete, please come on up, followed by Deborah Chappie.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? I'm Judy Pete, and I would like to express my opposition to this change. True, the rental program has been really well run over the course of its life, but I would like to say the past is the past. Times have changed, and what concerns me now is our future. What I would like to say, and I'd like to make 3 points because I only have 2 minutes. Point 1 is I think this is bad public policy. I heard tonight, and I didn't know these exact numbers, but what it sounds like is that the rest of the Estes community is going to lose opportunities, or I guess placed in line. They're going to go down from 257 to 209, and I think that's bad for the Estes Valley community. Secondly, for our neighborhood, my concern is, and I'll try to use this as an example. You have neighborhood A that has restrictions, neighborhood B that doesn't, which is what will happen if you lift the cap on Wincliffe right now. Logic dictates that those who want short-term rentals will naturally go to that void where there are no regulations. And in fact, I ran across a Harvard Business Review article from 2021 that pretty much supports that position. I have that here. Thirdly, concerns the density of the neighborhood. It says that it is 1 acre lots. I have a map of our subdivision, and I have copies I can pass out. I live in the 5th subdivision. That has 89 residences. And what we have there are, there's 25, I believe, of those are condos or duplexes. So you have all of this population squashed up, and a lot of those are rentals already. I think it'll be detrimental in the long run to my community. Thank you.
Judy, thank you very much. And regarding the
I'm
map,
sorry for the flapping.
No, you did great. Regarding the map, we do have that as part of our packet.
Excellent.
So we do have an electronic version of that map.
It's not my pen. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
All right. Bye-bye.
Deborah, please come up, and Sharon Winter, you'll be next.
Hi, thank you so much for your time, for being here tonight, all of you. And thank you for giving us the opportunity in Wincliffe to apply for this rezoning avenue. I'm Deborah Chappie. My husband and I own the Wincliffe Homes business that manages, about 37, 38 of those homes. I just want to be here to talk about the people. I read a lot of all the letters, actually, that were sent to you guys as well. I'd like to briefly speak about the fact that the homeowners who short-term rent their homes in our neighborhood are friends. They come to our annual 4th of July picnic, the end of the year holiday party. They come as many weeks during the year as they can. In fact, we have an average, Rich was telling me they come up 100 days on average. So they're really enjoying their homes, not just renting them out all the time. We connect and we visit and do dinners together. They're not dispassionate investors, is my point. In fact, frankly, the investment math doesn't add up to do that. It's also telling to note that half, maybe more than half, of the very few dissenting letters actually use the STR option in their avenue towards living here permanently. And many of us did. We did. It's a story repeated over and over by many. Rent, fall in love, invest to enjoy as much as possible while you share your home as a means to hold steady until you move there full time. That's just our Wincliffe story. A little note on the renters, they were easily targeted somehow in those letters, and it's not the case. They're families. They write notes in our we have little books and things where they write how wonderful it was. They enjoy the wildlife, the beauty of the nature, the homes, the Rockies. 70% of our business is return, as well as personal referrals. Anyway, just to sum up, the many of us supporting, and even of those who weren't supporting, this beautiful historical cycle of our neighborhood, renting, buying, sharing, living. That's been our story for 50 plus years. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, all of you.
Thank you very much, Deborah.
All right, Sharon, please come up. John Winter, you'll be next.
Okay.
Someone put nerve gas in the room. I'm feeling nervous too. My name is Sharon Winter. My husband John and I own 3147 Iger Trail in Wincliffe. My family has found a home in the Rockies since before I could walk, when my dad used to carry us around on his shoulders before we could walk. We love this country and we love this state. When one of the few remaining lots in Wincliffe became available, John and I took the opportunity to make a long-held dream come true and decided to build a home on the side of a mountain. Our plans were snarled by last year's changes to Larimer County SDR regulations, which is why we're especially motivated to advocate for rezoning Wincliffe to EVE1S. I was the original applicant, representing a broad group of 129 property owners who support the application. That group is detailed in the signature block of a letter that we sent to you on February 14th. We made every effort to provide both historic and current data to support the application and did not make claims that we couldn't back up. We acknowledge that a small percentage of residents are not in favor of rezoning, completely respect their opinions. The common refrain of opposition seems to be fear of and speculation that Wincliffe, should it be rezoned, would become inundated with SDRs. However, no data has been provided to support those claims. There have been no cases cited where commercial investment properties have been driven by profit motives into purchasing properties and then putting them into purely investment status. That just hasn't happened. Return on investment in Wincliffe is extremely poor, and that won't change if we get rezoned. That's really what's been historically kept the numbers down. During the county's process of honing in on new regulations last year.
If you could do a closing sentence, Sharon. The 2 minutes are up, so if you could just wrap it up, please.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
Let me skip my next paragraph. I would just suggest that Wincliffe is not a threat to other communities, but I would suggest that it can help communities by example and policy. Thank you so much to Mr. Lafferty for your help, and thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Sharon.
All right, John, please come up, and Rich Chappie, you're next.
Hello, my name is John Wenner, and I would just like to give you a little bit more of Sharon and I's story. And that's Wenner, W-E-N-N-E-R. Sharon and I have a house at 3147 Iger Trail. We bought the property in the fall of 2021 and started building a home a few months later. We bought the property in anticipation that we would rent it for a while before moving there permanently. The potential to rent our home was a significant and determining factor in our decision to buy and build in Windcliff. The only reason we are comfortable offering our home as a short-term rental is that having rented various Windcliff properties since 2009, we're very familiar with the strict regulations put in place by the Windcliff Property Owners Association. The neighborhood is full of kind, generous, welcoming people who at the same time hold the bar high regarding conduct and courtesy. We were excited to have the opportunity to rent our home, not just to help with expenses, but to give others the opportunity to experience God's creation as we have been fortunate to do in the past. We've been on the STR waiting list since October of 2021. But as we were building the house, the regulations changed and such that we can no longer obtain a rental license due to the separation requirements. Because of this change, we now have no clear financial path forward. I'm grateful that you've created the new EVE1S zone, and I strongly support the rezoning of Windcliff into this zone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John.
Rich, come on up. Robert Foster, you will be.
It is Rich Chappie, C-H-I-A-P-P-E. And Deborah and I, as she said, are at 2170 Windcliff Drive, and we also own the Gatehouse, the vacation rental and real estate office at the entrance to Windcliff, 2220 Windcliff Drive. First and foremost, I'll start with it, I'll end with it. I want to thank you guys. It's been a long road. You guys have listened. You've read a lot of letters. You've compiled a lot of thoughts and come up with a creative solution. And we think rezoning and the EVE1S creation for rezoning and that opportunity, and we're very honored and thankful for that opportunity. As Deborah mentioned, there's that life cycle in Windcliff. You've heard enough of it. But I'd also put in my little personal note that it's especially for the sustainability of our on-site vacation rental program, our business at the bottom of Windcliff, that we, in order to be sustainable, there has to be a path for new owners to get new applications, because inevitably most, if not all, of our existing short-term rentals will eventually come out of the program. Those are going to be people who come up, they retire, they live there full-time, and our numbers go down. And obviously there's an economy of scale we depend on. I believe Windcliff is perfectly compatible and situated to have the high density of STRs that we've always had. If especially when you consider we're completely tucked in between the national park, national forest, and 4,800 beds at the YMCA of the Rockies, not to mention hundreds of acres of accommodation zones. And every one of those accommodation zones, as it was mentioned earlier, thank you, is got the potential for a short-term rental license, but yet there's not a lot of people flocking to just buy up everything that's in an accommodation zone with no cap for a short-term rental. So EV1S zoning is perfect for Windcliff. It's still residential, still the same protections and enjoyment we've had as E1. And bottom line is, again, just thanks for hearing us. Thanks for the hard work of your staff. It will not go unnoticed and unappreciated. Thanks.
Thank you, Rich.
Robert Foster and William Brown, you'll be next.
Chairman Kafalis, Mr. Chappie was referring to the map that's over on the other side of the room. It's also the map on the screen here tonight, and it's in your packet. I can't remember which page, but there's a map that's in the packet that refers to what he was talking
Did you want to comment on the map?
about. No, I just wanted you to be aware that there was the map, and it referenced the areas that he was talking about.
Thank you, sir.
And
welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. If I can say one thing without eating into my time, there's also a copy of that map in the February 14th letter that was referenced by Ms. Wenner, one of the exhibits. Okay, I'm ready. I'm Robert Foster, and I live at 3420 Eagle Cliff Circle Drive. I'm a Windcliff resident with my wife and my 2 dogs. I just want to address briefly the issue that you have to consider called public benefit or public interest. Public benefit or this mic's cutting in and out. Public benefit.
You can back off a little bit,
Okay.
Robert. I'm with you.
All right, thanks. Public benefit or public interest, as far as I'm able to tell, really means, does the community benefit beyond the benefit of an individual applicant? And what that means here isn't entirely clear to me, but I think it does mean this. I think it means when it benefits a community, as we're saying it will here, it'll benefit the community of Windcliff if you approve this, and I strongly support approval of the rezoning. That will benefit the Windcliff community. You've heard almost without opposition, maybe without opposition, that the community has benefited for the past many decades by virtue of having a rental program. And all we're asking for here is the ability to continue that success, to continue that thriving community, to be able to continue having a community which is successful in the Tunnel Road region of the Estes Valley by virtue of the rezoning. That's really all we're asking. And not only is the applicant asking it, and not only am I asking it, but fully somewhere between 80 and 85% of people surveyed also supported it, and approximately half the residents signed our February 14th letter. I submit that alone shows that the public benefit is supported. So thank you very much. Thank you for your commitment this evening. We all appreciate it.
All right, William Brown, please come up, and Richard Mulhern, you're next.
Good evening. My name is Bill Brown. I'm a resident of Estes Park. I'm not a short-term rental owner, never have been, don't intend to be. I am, however, on the board of the Estes Valley Short-Term Rental Alliance and was one of the founding members of them. And my concern all along has been the impact of regulations of various sorts of short-term rentals on the tourist economy of Estes Park. The tourist economy of Estes Park is highly dependent on visitor lodging, and the visitor lodging tax in the Estes Valley, 40% of it comes from short-term rentals. So it's a significant element of our visitor lodging stock. So I want to mention just a couple things on, Matt, can you put up the criteria? Because I think it's important to mention 2 criteria. One is the issue of whether there's a change in circumstances. I believe the moment you put in a 500-foot limit, you've created a change in circumstances by your own regulation. And that obviously has affected this particular development significantly. It affects other areas too. I believe that the long-term effect of that, particularly in areas where this cap will remain in effect, will be over time to reduce the number of short-term rentals. I think that was the intent, to reduce it in residential zones, and I think it will accomplish that over time simply because of the difficulty of having a place that isn't within 500 feet of another short-term rental. So because of that, it's important that we have some methodology to maintain our visitor lodging stock. This does that. It provides some flexibility in an area that likes these to have them, and it also provides a public benefit by all of the lodging taxes and tourism revenue that's created. So thank you. I urge you to approve this.
Thank you, Bill.
Richard, please come up, and that's the last person we have signed up on our in-person public comment list.
I'd just like to express my appreciation. I think overall people have done very well with sticking to our 2 minutes or so. So I appreciate that very much.
My name is Richard Mulhern. I live in Estes Park, Colorado, and I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak before my elected commissioners. It's always a privilege. I would ask that you'd approve this application from Wincliffe for this new zone of EVE1S. I don't own a house and I don't live in Wincliffe, but I do have short-term rentals in Estes Park. I attended all of the hearings concerning short-term rentals in both Estes Park and in these chambers when you were discussing that. I saw all the effort, the discussion, the concessions that went into the final approvals. Wincliffe would be an ideal community to implement this zoning change. I believe that that a zoning change for Wincliffe would show that your decision to create this new zone was a good decision. And I also remember that there was a group from Red Feather that were interested in this zoning. This would just be added to the successful decisions this board has made during your tenure, including the support of the Mental Health Center, which you so strongly supported. I appreciated that. Again, I'm just asking that you would approve this. And I know from all the things you did that you listen to everyone that talks to you here. So thank you so much.
Richard, please spell your last name.
Mulhern.
Thank you, sir.
That's the last person we have signed up. We could have had other people come in without signing up if you'd like to confirm.
What I'd like to do now is go to the folks online.
Okay.
And then we will certainly, if there are folks who may be here in person who did not sign up, you'll certainly have that opportunity. But I would like to go to the folks online. Thanks. Thank you, Jenny.
Certainly, and just a reminder for those joining us online, please use the raise your hand function. We currently have 7 hands raised. So we'll start with Walter Dietrich. I will unmute you and you will have 2 minutes to talk. Mr. Dietrich, please continue. And once again, I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name.
Thank you very much. My name, can you hear me?
Walter, we can hear you resoundingly.
Okay, well, I will speak a little more quietly then. My name is Walter Dietrich. The last name is spelled like Diet Rich, Dietrich. I'm a very lucky person in that I have actually lived on the mountain where Wincliffe is located for 68 years. I've spent all of my summers there and have been there long before Wincliffe or the Busers bought land on the mountain. My wife and I are currently owners in Wincliffe. We live at 1641 Zermatt Trail. We also have additional property at 2330 Wind River Trail, which is adjacent. And along with my sisters, we own over 120 acres at 2160 Wind River Trail, 2140 Wind River Trail, 3020 Bighorn Trail, and another 80-acre piece that's adjacent to and contingent to Wincliffe. 6 generations of my family has been on this mountainside, and from the beginning, Wincliffe has had rental property. It has always been a part of it, and as a neighbor and a significant neighbor, I mean, really, other than the national park or forest or the YMCA, we're really the largest landowner, I think, adjacent to Wincliffe. We have found their rental program to be excellent, well-serviced, really well run. And from our point of view, we have frequently had friends use that program, and it allows us to have a greater number of our friends in the Estes Valley. I strongly support the change to the EVE1S and think that it will allow Wincliffe to remain in the same position that it's been for the last 50 years, the period of time that I have known it, and it's appropriate that the zoning change be made. I strongly support it.
Walter, thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Next up. Next up, we have Ellen Duarn. I will unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Okay. Hear me? I'm getting.
Ellen, you may need to Turn off the sound
I'd suggest turning off
out
any
of
of
one
the
of your
feeds,
devices.
like YouTube or.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, maybe can you hear me now? No,
Yes, we can.
Yes.
you can hear me. Okay. All right, I'm getting a lot of feedback. All right, I will try to, oh, shoot. I can't do that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I think they can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, Ellen, we can hear you. This is John Cafalas, Chair.
It might go to somebody else.
Maybe she can't hear us.
Ellen, can you hear us? Ellen, we can hear you.
Hello?
Hi, Ellen, we can hear you.
Okay, gosh, I'm sorry. I'm getting a lot of feedback, so hopefully I won't sound weird. All right, I'm ready to speak. I don't see the timer. Oh, good, you're ready for me. Great. So I've also been a Windcliff resident for 20 years. Not a resident, but an owner of a condo. I have the same story as many. I've been coming to Estes Park for 60 years, my entire life. My parents brought me and we went to the Y camp. My husband and I found Windcliff because we were looking for a place also for our family. And that took us to buying the condo. And now we are at the same point as some of the other families where we are building our dream home. Actually, it's built and we are selling the condo to make that dream happen. But I want you to know that the reason that we decided to build again at Windcliff, we could have picked anywhere, but we knew that we had confidence in the HOA. We saw it governing over all the years that we were there. We loved the fact that there's the gatehouse and the security in that. And the infrastructure is maintained by staff. The roads are well maintained. And the biggest thing is we knew that we could take the risk to build a house because we would have the ability to rent our home if we needed to. So the new regulations enacted by Larimer County really did change one of the big factors that we relied on in making our decision to build. So just, I want to make sure you understand there's no big money to be made by renting our home. It's a very scary and it's a financial risk, actually. There's no winter economy in Estes Park and definitely no financial gain. So that is the big point. I also wanted to speak to some other things that others have mentioned. 6 of the homeowners who are in favor of
Ellen,
are actually retire there at some point.
Excuse me, we're at the 2 minutes. Could you
But they will be out of it.
Somehow we need to communicate to her. But I would appreciate a closing statement. We're at the 2 minutes.
I muted her so he could speak, but then I've asked her to unmute to finish.
Okay, we muted her so she could hear you, but now we've asked her to unmute and we're not seeing her unmute.
Oh, there she is.
Okay. Because I can't really hear myself or you guys, I'm not sure if I am cut off or should I continue?
Yes, Ellen, this is Rebecca Everett. If you could, the chair has asked you to just wrap up your final comments here. You've passed your 2 minutes.
Excellent. Okay, I am definitely in favor and I'm really hoping that you will vote in that manner. I just wanted to mention that the 5th subdivision is very dense and that creates, it was done purposely to create animal.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Ellen. And we have read your written comments as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and all your work.
Absolutely. Let's move on, please.
All right, next is John Donaghy. I'm going to allow you to speak and you will have 2 minutes.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, very good. Good evening. My name is John Donaghy. My wife, Ellen Dorn, who you just heard from, and I have owned a condo in Windcliff since 2003. We're now selling it, and we will obviously be significantly impacted by this rezoning decision, so I'm strongly in favor of this rezoning. I'd like to respond to some of the objections that have been expressed by a very small group of our neighbors. The vast majority of Windcliff homeowners are in support of the rezoning. The opinion of the few who do oppose it are just that, opinions. While they're certainly welcome to their opinions and we respect them, they're based mostly on perceived fears of what might happen if Windcliff is rezoned. They're not really rooted in any fact or historic precedent. And the fact is, since our inception, Windcliff has successfully self-regulated short-term rentals long before the county chose to do so. So the common issues that have been cited in opposition are the fear of investors creating unlimited STRs. Having rented our condo for many years, we can attest that this is not a money-making venture. Rental income does not offset the actual cost of owning and maintaining a home in Windcliff. So anyone who claims that our right to rent is based on trying to make money clearly has never done it themselves. Another opposition point is speeding. And the fact is, Windcliff roads are really well maintained, but they're narrow, steep, and winding mountain roads, and visitors who come here are generally terrified driving on our roads. For those of us who walk regularly, we can attest that the speeders are those who live there full time and who are much more comfortable driving on the roads. Noise is another issue. We have clear noise ordinances built into our WPOA regulations, and all the homeowners and renters are well aware of them. The vast majority of the noise on our mountain comes from contractors working in the neighborhood. Ironically, the few times that we've had to address any minor noise issues, and I mean very few times, the homes in question have been full-time owners who had visiting guests. Lastly, I just want to say that the
Yes,
people
John.
who are in opposition.
Please make your last statement.
Okay, the people who are in opposition have also taken advantage of the rental program in their history, and so it just doesn't feel right that they would deny us, the current and future owners, that very same right going forward. Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome. Thank you. Let's move on to the next person, please.
Next, we have Kaiser Youssef. I will ask you to unmute, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, sir, we can.
Yes. My name is Kaiser Yusuf. I'm a physician, and we've been coming here to Estes Park with my wife, Mary J., for nearly 30 years. I had to retire because I had a stroke. So then we decided to buy a lot where we can build a one-level home and hopefully spend 6 months of summer in Estes Park and then 6 months back home in Houston. So that will just make it easy for me. And that was our intention. And when we bought it, that's what we were told. So we're looking forward to hopefully being able to spend our 6 months in summer over there and be part of the community, which we really love. We're strongly in support, and we live on 2000 Windcliff. My first name is spelled Quaiser, and my last name Y as in Yankee, U S as in Sam, U F as in Frank. And I greatly appreciate you listening to me. Thank you very much for all your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaiser. Thank you for your comment.
Next up, we have Stephen Massad. You may unmute.
Good evening. Yes. Stephen Massad, Massad. I'm the owner of 1801 Aspen Cliff Court at Windcliff. I started renting at Windcliff in 1993 for just a couple of vacation weeks every summer. Then after I retired in 2015, we built a home here. I'm only here a few months out of the year, but I'm not interested in renting the other times. But I do support the rezoning because I don't think the cap and separation requirements make sense for this community. I'd like to make one specific comment on the discussion of the criteria about adequate infrastructure. Perhaps there are individual homes here that would not qualify for an individual STR license because you might decide that the roads to that particular house don't meet the criteria for a rental license. I don't know. I'm not aware of any, but perhaps so. But I don't see why that criteria would be a hurdle to rezoning the community as a whole. We have roads that are good roads, we have water, we have snow plowing, et cetera. So I think it's important to distinguish those two things, the individual license versus the rezoning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for your time and your hard work in these positions.
Thank you as well, Stephen. Have a good evening.
Next, we have Lanier Wilden.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Lanier Wilden, and I'll probably have to spell both names for you. LANIERWHILDEN. My family and I would never have known about Windcliff were it not for the rental program. We wanted to come to Estes Park because my husband had spent all of his younger years here and talked to a friend about where we should stay. He suggested that we stay at Windcliff. We did, and we loved it. And we met wonderful people and other STR people and decided later to buy and build when we could and build a retirement home. We have done this, and it has been a wonderful decision for our whole family. Our grandchildren and children regularly come to visit us during the summer, all due to the availability of the STR program, because we would never have known about it had it not existed. And we love Windcliff, and we love all of the people there. And this is the same very history that so many people who own houses now have had, because they came here first as renters, and then they would buy and sort of subsidize some of their expenses by renting their house. And then when it came time when they could do better, they moved into their house full time or choose not to rent. And we do not rent, but we love it, and we love the people that we've met. And I hope that you will allow free zoning, because we think that the STR program is the lifeblood of Windcliff. It has brought us so many wonderful people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lanier.
All right, next we have Albert Medecki. I will unmute you, and you have 2 minutes.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir.
All right. My name is Albert Middeke. It's Middeke. And my wife and I, Teresa, own 1741 Aspen Cliff Court. We just purchased in 2021, and we fit the profile you've heard many, many times tonight. We rented at Windcliff first several times, and then we looked all over Colorado for a place to purchase because we fell in love with Colorado. Ultimately, we ended up coming back to Estes Park and Windcliff, and for a lot of the reasons you heard, it was something that had a great program. The HOA supported it, and we could afford to visit while we still lived in St. Louis, with the intent of someday spending more time. And that has worked great to date. I had some concerns about renting our place out in the beginning because I didn't want to come to it in worse shape than I left it. I'll tell you, the rental program we have and Rich's team, it's actually in better shape when we get there to visit it, and it's maintained probably much better than I would be able to do if I were only coming 1 month a year or 2 months a year. So anyway, we're in full support of it, of the rezoning. We thank you for your time, and thanks for hearing me out. And that's it.
Thanks, Albert.
All right, next we have Carol Ann Frost.
Thank you very much. My name is Carol Ann Frost. I've been a homeowner at Wincliffe for 12 years. I currently own a property at 1601 Zermatt Trail. Most of all, I want to thank the commissioners, the staff, all of you who have worked so hard to do the right thing, to help us, to help Larimer County, Estes Valley, and so on. My home is not a short-term rental. I'm going to keep this short. I strongly support the proposal, and there have been so many thoughtful, articulate voices this evening. I don't need to add anything to it other than I've really benefited from this community, and I deeply enjoy visiting with the renters, even though I'm not part of the rental program. They're a terrific addition to the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol.
Next we have Wade Wilden.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
My name is Wade Wilden, and my wife and I own a home at 2906 Cedar Cliff. I have been on the Wincliffe board since 1983, and I would like to share with you some of the history of the short-term rentals at Wincliffe. In the early 1990s, a small group of Wincliffe owners tried to stop short-term rentals at Wincliffe. Wincliffe owners soundly defeated that effort. The Wincliffe owners wanted the right to short-term rent because that is how most of the renters reached their dream of retiring at Wincliffe. In 2021, Wincliffe amended its covenants. The amendment included very strong rules permitting and regulating short-term rentals. 113 Wincliffe owners signed that amendment. When Larimer County created the rezoning option, the challenge to Wincliffe owners was to prove that Wincliffe community still strongly supported the short-term rentals. The board commissioned a blind survey, which you have. 111 owners responded, and 4 had no opinion, and 15 voted no. Of the 107 who voted, 92 supported rezoning, and that is an 86% support. You have received a few letters from Wincliffe owners not supporting short-term rentals. Most of those letters are from the same 15 who voted no on our survey, and several are separate letters from individuals who live in the same home. In addition, most of those opposition letters say that they are fine with the Wincliffe existing number of short-term rentals, but they fear an increase in short-term rentals. That is the same fear expressed years ago, but it is still not supported by any facts. For 50 years, short-term rentals at Wincliffe have stayed around 1/3 of all homes, and there's no reason for that number to increase. And it's more likely that the number will drop because more and more Wincliffe owners are retiring and removing their homes from the short-term rental in order to spend most of the time at Wincliffe. Also, please note that there have been very few, if any, letters from neighbors adjacent to Wincliffe property that oppose the requested rezoning. And finally, I'd like to thank you for creating the rezoning option so that Wincliffe can continue to live as it has for the last 50 years. And I'll leave you with one question. If Wincliffe does not qualify for this zoning, then who would qualify for it? Thank you very much. We appreciate all the work you've done.
Thank you, Wade.
Next we have James Natale. I'll unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes.
Hi, this is Kim Natale. It's Natale. We live at 1421 St. Moritz Trail, and I support the change. I may be a little different from many of the other Wincliffe owners, although many of us are the same. Our home was built in 1981. My mother and father purchased it at that time, and they allowed it to be used for rentals. And so when I inherited it, when they both passed away, I continued to allow for short-term rentals until 2022. What has happened is, if you allow for short-term rentals, it allows me to cover part of my expenses at Windcliff. And my occupation was a teacher. I am what I would call a middle-income person, certainly not wealthy. And if you don't allow short-term rentals, you take people like me and remove them from the Windcliff pool. And I think one of the things that makes our community unique is that there's a range of incomes and interests that really make the community an exciting and vibrant place to be. I'd encourage you to keep things in place that allow us to be the community that is just not one for the ultra wealthy, but one for everyone. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you as well. Thank you for your public comment.
Next, we have Wayne Rashecki. We'll allow you to speak, and you'll have 2 minutes.
This is Julia Reschke, Reschke. My husband and I are homeowners in Windcliff, and I am a different voice tonight. I'm actually urging that the proposal be denied. And I understand that most people will disagree with that. But part of my reasoning is that I'm just not sure that it really makes sense that Windcliff would have a special arrangement that differs from the rest of Estes Valley. If the proposal goes forward, it sounds like Windcliff would, at least for now, be the only residential type neighborhood not subjected to the permit cap and the other restrictions. You're quite right that the people who've spoken before me are quite right that we don't have any data because what we're talking about are future issues. And of course, there's no guarantee one way or another, but I do feel like this proposal would open the door to have a significantly higher percentage of rentals than we currently have now. I am wondering if there's any possibility of having some kind of grandfathering in so that the people who are currently in the rental program or who are in the process of building a home for the rental program could do so and could keep their status. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Julia.
Next, we have Trey Garland.
Hi, I'm Father Trey Garland. We're building a house currently at 1479 San Moritz Trail, but my mother and I have been property owners in Windcliff since 2013. I am a parish priest. I have lived all my adult life in either church supplied housing or on my stipend, and my mother is widowed. And we started building our house prior to the rule change, and we, like everyone else, lined up to get our permit. And then the rules changed, and the rules changing have a huge impact on us. We wouldn't be able to afford our house in Windcliff, and like a lot of other property owners there, my parents went to Windcliff before I was born, and I first saw snow in Windcliff. And after my dad died, we thought it would be a fitting memorial to have a house there. And like everyone else, I understand the fear. The fear of the unknown is always one of those things in human nature that just touches us. But doing things out of fear is not really a healthy or a good response. And there are certainly plenty of other places in Estes Park that are not capped for people to go and spend their money. And I can tell you, at least financially speaking, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for someone to come in and just to buy up Windcliff. The money it's not that good. That much I can tell you for sure. I ask and I urge that you please support this, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Father.
Next, we have Joanne Fritz.
Hi, thanks for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Joanne Joni Fritz, Fritz. I own a small home at 1695 Windcliff Drive, where my sister now lives. Our uncle, John Chandler, bought the home in 1971, and it's remained in the family ever since. I am not as sure as most of the others who've spoken tonight that existing conditions in Windcliff that protect the development from becoming overwhelmed by short-term rentals and the potential problem with vacationing renters will continue indefinitely, and agree that evidence will only come with time. I do totally agree that Windcliff is a wonderful community of friendly and mutually supportive neighbors. However, I fear that the current traditions and controls that protect the character of our community will eventually disappear and be replaced by those of investors. If the current proposal passes, future changes could easily result in over 50% participation in short-term rentals, rather than what I understand is currently the 30 to 35% of Windcliff owners using their homes this way today. If Windcliff becomes the only avenue for short-term rentals, won't that draw even more investors to the community? I also have difficulty understanding why, as proponents of the changes state, short-term rentals are not a moneymaker in Windcliff that would attract those investors. If that is true, long-term rentals should be adequate for families to either hold a home available for their retirement or for their children to be able to move into after the parents pass on. I'd prefer to see some change below the total exemption from cap and separation controls Windcliff has requested. And agree with Julie that it would be nice to see those caught in a crunch between building and new rules enabled to continue short-term rental in some way.
Joanne, thank you so much for your comments. We're over the 2 minutes by a bit.
Yeah, thanks for giving me a chance to speak.
Of course, thank you.
All right, next is Kurt Davis.
Hello, my name is Kurt Davis, and my wife and I, Karen, we live at 2965 Eagle Cliff Drive. My first name is Kurt, C-U-R-T, last name is Davis, D-A-V-I-S. We purchased a house in Windcliff in 2021. I am the proud owner of a 30-year jumbo mortgage. There is no way that we're going to be able to pay off that mortgage in our lifetime, and so we hope to leave this property to our children, and we hope to retire there. I hope to retire in a few years. We already spend more than 100 days a year in Windcliff, and we're trying to increase that every year as I get closer and closer to retirement. Being part of the SDR program has helped offset the tremendous cost that it takes to even just maintain a house in Windcliff. I just don't foresee any economic sense in that investors could acquire properties and then actually make money out of a house in Windcliff because of the cost of acquiring one. It just doesn't make any sense that is a concern, because it just isn't. It doesn't make anybody who's done it knows that that's not a money-making venture. And, you know, I really appreciate that the county and the county commissioners and the county staff created this opportunity for the EV1S, because it does fit Windcliff and its historic use. And I really appreciate the time that the county commissioners have taken tonight in order to listen to our concerns and our support. And I strongly support it. And I appreciate, again, your time, and thank you again.
Thank you, Kurt.
Next, we have Floyd Jennings.
Hello, Floyd Jennings here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir.
Very good. Yes, Myself and Corolla bought some property about 3 years ago in Windcliff. We love it there. We bought it because we stayed there a few times in short-term rentals, and we decided that'd be a place that we wouldn't mind retiring in. So we bought the property. We should be breaking ground on it sometime this year. I wanted to say that I fully support the rezoning effort that's going on. I've listened to a lot of the conversations and in different meetings, and I do believe that there is certainly a majority of people who would like to see that rezoning happen. So having said that, I really don't want to go on a whole lot more. I think that the evidence is in the verbal comments that's been given tonight and in previous other meetings. So I support it. I thank you for the opportunity to make that change because I think it's important. And I believe that with the management of the HOA, with the management of the rental company, and of course with the oversight of the county, that I really don't see a lot of problems that are going to present themselves. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time, Floyd.
Yes.
All right, next we have Melissa Eigenman.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Melissa Eigenman. You said it perfectly. His last name is spelled Eigenmann. And my husband and I own property on Jungfrau Trail in Windcliff, and we are in full support of the rezoning. As been mentioned earlier, Windcliff supports the STRs with their HOA covenants, coupled with significant processes that really promote harmony between both the full and the part-time residents on the mountain. The Gatehouse, our on-site rental company, really holds our guests to really, truly high standards, and they keep the short-term rentals in really immaculate condition when they're not being used by the homeowners. And as mentioned earlier, most of our renters are repeat guests. Our neighborhood is a tight-knit group. It's a very unique group. We all know our neighbors. We come together several times a year. But I think the most important thing about our neighborhood is that we are all dedicated to keeping Windcliff a desirable place to live and retire in the Estes Valley, making this rezoning a perfect thing for Windcliff. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to initiate this new zoning category and for considering Windcliff for rezoning. Again, my husband and I are in full support of the rezoning. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Melissa.
Next, we have Rick Levinson.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Rick Levinson, Levinson, and myself and my sister recently purchased a property at 3245 Eagle Cliff Drive, number 1. And we would like to just throw our support behind the rezoning. And we both have been coming to the Estes Valley since we were little children, and we've always dreamed of owning property. And the STR program has really enabled us to do this because it does counter some of the costs of owning in Windcliff, and it really makes a big difference. And I just want to say that if it was a grandfathering situation, then new people like us wouldn't have an opportunity. And as I said, there's this life cycle where new people do come in as other people retire. It's something that makes Windcliff a very special place. So I just want to say I want to thank the commission and all the staff for putting together the EVS rezoning, and I throw our support behind it, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well, Rick.
Next, we have Michael Johnson.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name's Michael Johnson. My wife and I, Tracy, live at 1441 St. Moritz in Windcliff, obviously. I just wanted to express my thanks for everybody and also to express our strong support for the change in the zoning. We are a classic example of folks that have vacationed at Windcliff, bought at Windcliff, were in the rental program at Windcliff. Eventually, we went out of the program, and we currently use the home part-time and hope to retire there. The one issue that we're seeing is that without the ability, before I say this, I do want to mention we had a rental license that we did surrender. We felt very strongly about surrendering our STR because they were a scarce resource, and we wanted people like the Winners and Eileen and some of the other folks to have a better shot at a STR. So we surrendered our license. We're very, very strongly in favor of this rezone. And the rezone would give our kids, who may not be as fortunate as we are when they inherit the house, that maybe they do need to be able to rent. And with the caps the way they are, they may be prevented. And I'll just finish on one note. The financial incentives, having just recently built a house there about 5 or 6 years ago, I can tell you that financially it makes 0 sense at all. So I discount the idea of the investors. Thank you for your time. And as I mentioned, we're highly in support of this. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Michael.
Next, we have James Mapes.
Welcome, James. You're on mute. If you could unmute yourself, please.
Okay, now you should be able to hear me.
Got it.
Okay, this is Jim Mapes, and Anita, my wife, and I bought our house in 2013. We've been coming to Estes Park for almost 40 years, and most of the time we stayed at the Y, and we'd always look up at Windcliff and, you know, someday we'd like to own there. And we had the opportunity to do that in 2013. But the only way that we could have afforded it at that point was to be able to have a short-term rental. And so we certainly are very much in favor of changing the zoning. Also, just from the standpoint of, you know, we expect to be full-time residents in the near future. And at that point, we'd have to give up our STR license. And as we pass this down to our children who very much want to keep the house, it would be very difficult for them to then be able to obtain a license, and they're not going to be able to be full-time residents for a long time. So I think that, you know, when you look at that type of thing, it really is an important aspect that we are able to rezone the properties. And I want to thank the commissioners for all the effort that has gone into this. And so very much in support of the EVE1S. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
That is the last hand we have raised, so I will take this opportunity to once again apologize for all of those names I mispronounced. We do have one more attendee who has just raised a hand if you would like them to be able to speak online. Oh, they put their hand down. Never mind.
Yes, please. We'll go to that person online, and then we'll check for the.
They put their hand down, so we don't have any hands raised right now.
So you can you double check that one more time?
Oh, they put their hand up, and actually we have somebody who has already spoken, who has raised their hand for a second time. I don't believe you would like to let them speak.
So is there a hand raised? There are no hands raised.
No hands raised.
For folks who have not had an opportunity to already speak.
Now we have another hand raised and one more. 2 hands raised.
Could you get clarification on what their intentions are, please?
We have John Weisler. Are you intending to make public comment?
Yes, ma'am. That's okay.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, you'll have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name's John Weisler. My wife, Lisa, and I recently completed our house. We finished it back in May of 2023. And we were under the assumption that we were going to be able to have the option to rent our house if we so desired. And then we found out the county, you know, imposed this new regulation saying that there's a cap on the number of short-term rentals. And we may not have that right. And so we were glad so many people in Windcliff took up the torch and spent a lot of endless hours and preparing for this and in the hopes of getting our subdivision rezoned. And I'm in favor of that. We may not do it right away, but I know my kids someday may have to do it. And another aspect, I'm a real estate appraiser, and no one's mentioned tonight the
the difference this zoning classification will have, what kind of impact on value. In my opinion, by imposing this zoning restrictions, this could negatively impact and cause diminution in value to these properties by imposing this or not changing the zoning by this keeping it status quo and the cap. So I am definitely in favor of the rezoning classification, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, John.
Okay.
We also have Mary Lou Sumioka.
Good evening, Mary Lou. Please identify yourself, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Mary Lou Sumioka, and my husband Steve and I own a cabin, not right in Windcliff, but directly below Windcliff. And I guess we've had this cabin in our family for 108 years. And the original developers of Windcliff in 1962 stated that no dwelling should be in sight of another. Windcliff has deviated a long way from that vision. And we feel that more STRs are yet another step in turning a beautiful mountainside community into really a big operation and an investment opportunity. And we'd like to note that the Windcliff, it's not called a Windcliff Homeowners Association, it's called a Windcliff Property Owners Association. And it seems to me that I've listened to all of this, and I feel that it seems like 1/3 is enough. If 57 properties are rented, that's enough. It's certainly a lot more than when we first came up there when I was 10 years old. And we have always refused to rent our log cabin because the hillside is fragile. The risk of fire is high. More renters means more risk. Not all renters share the same respect for the property and hillside as its owners do.
A closing comment, Mary Lou, please. Are you in support or opposing the rezoning?
I am definitely opposed to the rezone. I've listened to people's opinion. It seems to me that people could afford their properties without this. Of course, it's hard for me to know that, but it seems to me that a lot of people in Windcliff are very wealthy, certainly way more wealthy than we are.
Mary Lou, thank you very much for your comments. I don't mean to be rude, but
no, that's fine.
We're well over the 2 minutes.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you as well. Is there anyone else online, Jenny? Double, triple check, please.
No one else has a hand up. We have no hands up online.
Thank you. Then we'll go to the room, folks in person. As I mentioned earlier, if there are folks here in person who wish to offer testimony who may not have signed up, this would be your last opportunity. Come on up, sir. And I think by now you know the routine.
I do.
Thanks.
Commissioners, thank you very much for your time on this. My name's Chris Armstrong. My wife, family, and I own the home at 1960 Windcliff in Estes Park. You know, clearly the new cap on short-term rentals has had an impact, and a negative impact on many of the residents of Windcliff and perhaps other parts of Estes Park. In the same line, I think we all would agree that Estes Park, the Rocky Mountain National Park, is a world-class destination. My background is in travel and tourism for 45 years. And so I may see some things a little bit differently. But with 200, limiting the short-term rentals to 266, my question is, why is that? What's the magic number about 266 families? Why are we having to struggle with this? Because personally, Rocky Mountain National Park had 4.3 million visitors in 2022. And we're looking at considering 266 families in being able to stay at a residence there. And frankly, from my opinion, I don't know the numbers, but I can imagine Estes Park could quadruple that number of short-term rental parks, and which represents a significant revenue stream to Larimer County. And one other thing I want to keep in mind is, in all of this, in the whole perspective, we're really talking about 4, maybe 5 months out of the entire year. The rest of the time, Estes Park kind of pulls in the sidewalks, and it's quiet, and it's an absolute wonderful place to live. So with that in mind, thank you very much for your consideration, your time. Let's cut this short and let's get you guys home.
Thanks, Chris. And just to clarify, so you're in support, what is your position on the
Correction, I am very much in support of the rezoning.
in support.
So thank you, yes, please.
Okey-doke, thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
So once again, is there anyone else in the room who wishes to offer public comment, who may not have signed up on the sign-up sheet? I don't see any hands raised. Therefore, I think it is appropriate to close the public comment period. So we're done with that piece of the hearing. At this time, I'd like to ask Matt Lafferty if there are any comments you wish to offer based on by my count, I believe we had about 34 people offer public comment.
I'm sure that we would, Commissioner Falls, but I think you were going to offer a rebuttal period.
I was, but I believe I said that I wanted to give you a chance since
Okay.
where we kind of took over the original applicant. But when we get to the rebuttal, I'm going to modify what I said earlier because I didn't realize the three of you would be offering public comment. So certainly welcome Sharon as the original applicant if there are some rebuttals that you'd like to make based on what you heard. But overall, Matt, is there anything you could help add to the conversation based on what was heard that would help us make an informed decision?
A couple of things that came up during the presentations. Nobody, one comment was made that people outside of the Windcliff area are losing opportunity to have short-term rentals, and nobody's losing anything. The cap is just being reduced by virtue of the number that are already approved in there. So it's a wash. There's really not a reduction in the overall number of short-term rentals that would be allowed in that Estes Valley area. Potentially, it would go up by virtue that more could be approved in this area. The current regulations as they were adopted last June did not create the cap. The cap was created in 2016. So we've heard from several residents that said, well, I'm building my house and I was counting on being able to rent it. They weren't able to rent it because they were subject to the cap. So there was already a limitation that was put into place. The additional limitation of spacing put further restriction on them that could have caused, if there would have been an available permit that could be applied for and it was applied for somebody in the Windcliff Estates, it's possible they wouldn't have been able to meet that separation. They would have had to appeal that standard. So just wanted to clarify that. According to Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, when I say this, in every 2 years, they have to renew their license. So even the ones that are already in existence are going to have to renew their license every 2 years. And in the 4th year of the renewal, the second time, they have to comply with our regulations. And so they're going to have to come into compliance with our regulations. Lastly, I'd bring up that the question on whether or not I can transfer, the transfer for the existing they're allowed to transfer one time to a non-family member. After that, they can only transfer within family.
Just to follow up on what Mr. Lafferty said, it's important to remember that there's two things at play here. One is there's the land use regulations. And so the land use regulations are the part where it talks about where you'd have the folks who existed previously would come in as a non-conforming use. However, the state of Colorado added legislation that gave counties the power to have ordinances. Ordinances are different than a land use code. An ordinance is more like a speeding ticket or something like that. And so the ordinance allows us to regulate the short-term rentals and the licenses of the short-term rentals. And so even people who have the existing ones before the land use code changed, the ordinance applies to everybody. What we can't do with the ordinance is make them all of a sudden meet a bunch of additional requirements. And so if they had a short-term rental, they were operating in compliance, that's fine, but they still have to abide with the ordinance. And the purpose of the ordinance is if there are complaints, if people are not adhering to what they're supposed to adhere to, it gives us a mechanism to take away the license after due process is afforded to people who have a license. So the ordinance isn't intended to govern the setbacks or how many bedrooms you have to have or sort of those kinds of land use regulations. The purpose of the ordinance is to say you've got approval to have it, but if you violate your rules, there's a process we follow and we can take that away. So I just want to clarify that the ordinance is separate than the land use regulation. This zoning rechange wouldn't have any effect on the ordinance.
Thank you. Is there anything else, Matt?
Chairman Kvalis, that would be all that staff has to offer at this time.
Thank you, and thank you for your further clarification regarding land use code and ordinances. Before we go to Sharon for a couple of minutes of rebuttal, I would like to ask Amy White, our code compliance supervisor, if she could just elaborate a little bit more regarding the reference to the ordinance, because I know one of the issues that's a long-standing issue is enforcement. And so my question is, how does the enforcement ordinance, which we also updated last year, how does that apply in Windcliff? And also, given that the HOA, yes?
Go ahead, finish.
Oh, all right. Well, I think you get the gist of I'm trying to better understand the enforcement piece of this as it applies to Windcliff, as well as given that the POA, it has a lot of responsibility for oversight and the real estate company and the management. How does that interact?
Thank you, Commissioner Kapalis. Amy White, Code Compliance Supervisor. When we wrote the ordinance, as Frank was saying, and I'm so glad that he clarified that, we wrote in there that the renewal is every 2 years, and then every 4 years, these vacation homes that were approved under the Estes Valley Development Code regulations will now need to come into compliance with our short-term rentals. So that's an operations manual, that's no fire pits, that's all of those things that are required for them to do now. We cannot take that approval away, but we can restrict it and say, you have to do these additional things at this time. And it does, even if the rezoning takes effect, the ordinance will still apply to the vacation homes or the few short-term rentals at this point in Windcliff.
Thank you. So before we go to Sharon, yes, Commissioner.
Mr. Chair, since you got to ask the question, will I have a chance to ask questions after the rebuttal period?
And who do you wish to ask questions of?
Staff.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That was my intention. I merely inserted that question because Frank brought up his point, and I didn't mean to go out of turn or anything like that. So yes, of course,
Okay, thank you.
because we may have further questions of staff. So at this time, Sharon, if you would be kind enough to come on up and use your judgment. We said 5 minutes. If you don't need 5 minutes,
I don't need five.
that would be appreciated.
Thank you for the opportunity. I know I've already been given a chance to speak, so I'm just going to briefly address a topic that was raised this evening and to two specific cases. It addresses the broader topic of fairness. And of course, that's your job and your focus to make sure that you're applying regulations fairly. So we completely understand where that's coming from. And so two short notes on that. The first, I'd like to respectfully disagree with Mr. Lafferty, even though he's been fantastic with supporting me through navigating through this process. And that had to do with changing the circumstances, change of circumstances. I believe Mr. Lafferty said that because the change in regulations was a change to all, that it didn't apply. Did I get that correctly, Matt? I don't want to misspeak. That it was because it changed, that applied to everyone, that it applied to no one as a changed circumstance. I respectfully disagree, and that we're not presuming that these changes only affected Wincliffe. They obviously affected everyone, but they were indeed a change of circumstance. So I'd like to just say that we don't presume that we are asking for any special treatment in that regard. There was another comment on the same theme that said that this would be a special arrangement and Wincliffe would be the only neighborhood not subject to a cap. That would be, again, we claim no special treatment. We just are the first to apply for this zone. So we would be the first and only, but we're not requesting anything special. We're not requesting that you consider anything outside of whatever judgment brought you to create this zoning category in the first place. So again, I feel like these people are a group of kind, humble people. We're not asking for special treatment. And we would love to share what Wincliffe does well with the rest of the community. So that's what I'll have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay. Appreciate everyone's patience. So I think at this time, if commissioners have any additional questions of staff, we'll ask those questions, of course, and then I believe we can move into the deliberation portion of the hearing, and then offer the motion. So, Commissioner, please, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to respectfully push back on the last speaker because I want to ask Mr. Lafferty, this special zoning in this circumstance was created out of an effort from Wincliffe and others who had objections to the new regulations. And so there was an effort and a separate meeting with Wincliffe and those residents to create this kind of special circumstance to address some of their special concerns for that special neighborhood. Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I just want to clarify that this was something that was out of response from the organized efforts from the owners of the rental company and the owners to try to address a special need that they felt they needed because they felt like regulations were going to be impacting them in a way they were objectable to.
That was a premise for creating the zone district, and it was created as an opportunity, not as a given.
That's why this whole thing was created, was for this circumstance.
That's really correct. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Just want to clarify that. So secondly,
time out. Given that one of the commissioners has stepped away, I'm going to ask that we take a 5-minute recess so that we all can be assembled. It's an opportunity to get up and stretch. 5-minute recess until all three of us are here, and then we'll continue with the questions. 5 minutes, folks. 9:05. assemble. Thanks for the water. So before we go to additional questions that the commissioners may have, I wanted to give our principal planner an opportunity to further clarify the previous question.
Thank you, Chairman Kafals, Madam Chair, Commissioner Shaddock McNally. There were, and it was brought to my attention by one of the members in the public, there were no special meetings with the Windcliff Association or homeowners to develop that language. That just came about during the process of developing our regulations, that was a point of interest, and we created those regulations based upon the input received from that group. But there was no special meetings that we had with them.
But I want to just say that this zoning was created because of the Windcliff situation. It was created to address that challenge.
That's a correct statement.
Okay, just because I wanted to clarify that because that's my recollection, and just want to make sure that was that. So, Mr. Chair, I have another question.
Of course.
I'm kind of alarmed, a little concerned. There were several folks in the audience who testified that they bought land and building homes and assumed that they were just going to get a license. And they talked about, this new cap, which is not a new cap, as you stated, since 2016, so appreciate you clarifying that. But under the, until we updated these, before, even if we hadn't done anything, a lot of these people who just bought homes may not have been able to get a license because there was the cap. And so they went on a waiting list. So really what I've heard several times, because of the new regulations to 2023, that stopped them from getting any license. So really this change is actually really proactive for a lot of those people who just bought land in this development, that this will allow them to have licenses that they would not have had before. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it sounds like there's about 6 new licenses coming.
Yeah.
Right? So this is actually really a benefit for Windcliff, because now they can increase their short-term rental licensors inside that they wouldn't have had before these new regulations,
Right.
correct?
Right, except if a license would have became available for application, and it would have been to somebody in the Windcliff neighborhood, and they couldn't meet the separation requirement, then they would have been in a situation. Our new regs would have impacted them.
Which would have been the same with any other neighborhood, residential neighborhood in the county.
Yes, ma'am.
So my next question is, so how much, I heard, it's kind of really interested to hear, there's what sounds like about a handful of people that bought in land and are building. So obviously this is more development here. How much more land or home is there, or potential homes are being built in this area? Because it sounds like this could increase the density and the number. Is this something that what kind of development is this in the county? Are they allowed to just, are there lots there divided? What kind of situation is this?
If there are vacant lots within the development still available, then they can be built upon. And so it's limited to the number of lots that are currently available within the Windcliff Estates development that are authorized to have a dwelling on them that have not been built on. I apologize, I do not have that number with me this evening.
So this could, because of this change, this change is very much in the benefit of this development, because this will be able to increase the amount of short-term rentals overall in the Estes Valley because of this change.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions, Commissioner?
Just want to clarify, Mr. Chair, all these new short-term rentals that will be, if this is approved, that will be allowed to happen, that'll be allowed to happen because they won't have the other requirements of all the other homes in the Estes unincorporated area. Will they have to, they will have to do the fire safety and all the other ones of the new ones and have the more stringent qualifications to do that? Is that correct, including the road grade and all that stuff? But mostly I'm concerned about the fire safety.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens, do you have any questions of staff?
I just have one or two. So for folks who, I guess I'm going to ask Amy, have we had any calls out in this area, or is it mostly handled internally by the homeowners group or the property owners group?
Yeah, we've never had any complaints other than one, which was a vacation home that was approved for 8 guests and they were advertising for 16. That's the one that Mr. Darling is talking about that has come through the process and is in the process of getting a building permit.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, I think it's just important to clarify that it's not going to mean fewer opportunities than there already are for other people outside of this. I feel like that it's important to clarify that that this doesn't reduce the number. The number's already been reduced because of 57 that have been
Right.
approved.
And if you look at the cap now, and you look at the cap after it would be adjusted from this, there are 2 licenses that are available now, and there would be 2 licenses available then.
Right. Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I don't have any additional questions of staff at this time. So I believe we can move into the next phase of our hearing, which is the deliberation phase, offer our comments and what our thinking is on this proposal. And I think we'll go with Commissioner Shattuck McNally. Are you okay for going first?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
I know it's been a long evening. It's been a long day for me since full day. I'm going to make a few comments, and then I will talk about the criteria. We worked really hard, and staff worked extremely hard as we updated the short-term rental regulations, and those were for a lot of reasons, and I don't feel like that today is the reason that we need to relitigate that. That's not what we're here for, and we had those discussions, and a lot of you were there for those discussions, and so I think those reasons and more are still valid and important, and I guess my comment is, there are a lot of people who live in Windcliff that we've heard about that aren't here today, that submitted comments that I've heard a lot of strong pushback on and almost disregarding their comments and their viewpoints. And I feel like if you talk about what a wonderful neighborhood it is, I really wanted to encourage folks to maybe not view them so negatively and with such, in my opinion, disrespect that they're just opinions, because they're owners up there too and have just as many rights to have their quality of life respected and valued and have a voice in this process. And they might be a small percentage, but they're still Larimer County residents who pay property taxes and are part of that community. And I don't think they're the others in this neighborhood. They should be considered part of the neighborhood. And so that really kind of did not resonate with me very much, because I think that they should be considered and their viewpoints, because they do feel like this impacts them negatively. And they have a right to have that voice. I'm kind of concerned why some of these people who bought property in that community felt like they had a right to just have a license. There is a process. You have to go through the process and be granted that license. And there is an ordinance and a process. There may not be many complaints now, but there could be complaints in the future. And we have it tightened down and beefed up our enforcement. And I'm hoping the owners of the management company understand and respect that we want to have a good communication and a good process and make sure that everyone's playing fair and by the rules. So that's really important to me. And I feel that, I appreciate everyone wants to buy a home and own a home and wants to be able to afford it. We all do. But this is a special, unique community. I also been coming up every day of my life for 54 years, or actually longer than that. I won't kind of reveal my age because it's not really important. But I do, and this is a very special community to me, and I've come up and stayed and recreated, and I'm up there about once a week. So this is not, and I've driven up there and visited friends up in that neighborhood, and so I'm well aware of the specialness of that neighborhood and the beauty and the view, and it's important to me, and I understand you all value it as well. So I want to get those comments out of the way because I feel like the short-term rental license aren't, you're not entitled to them. They're a process. They're earned and they're applied for, and it's something that I wanted to make sure everyone understands that. With the review criteria, and I know this is a brand new process, and yes, we did work hard, and the staff, I want to thank you for all the work that you put into this because it is a very involved process and it's something new. And we knew this was coming, and we had a lot of conversations about this, and that was a very long process over the last couple of years, and you all hung in there, and I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank my colleagues too, because those were long hearings, and I know we took a lot of thought and took a lot of public comment on that as well. And so I appreciate that we have the review criteria, and now that we're actually not only talking about it and putting them on paper, but we're actually exercising them and actually trying them out and literally driving the car and finding out how it works. And so with that, the review criteria, that's why I specifically asked that question, is do they have to meet all of the different criteria? And because we have other processes where we have that discretion, and there's a lot of subjectivity here, which is obviously important and intentional in some ways, because there is some subjectivity to this. And I just, as we're starting to hear from folks and going through this process and really having to apply this now, I agree, like the GMA and things, some of those things don't apply. But the reason I asked about meeting the review criteria, because meeting all of them, because there's some of these that I'm not sure they meet that. I really does not resonate to me about community need or public benefit and the change in circumstances, because I don't feel us applying the regulations to the whole county with a change of circumstances, because they were still able to have those 59. They were still not able, they were still having to wait for the list. There was only 2 available. There was still the cap. It's not the exchange. This is actually an improvement in the circumstances for them. And so, and I really don't think this is a community need or benefit. It's not helping with senior housing, affordable housing, childcare. You can talk all you want about lodging taxes and things, but I don't see I don't see millions of people not coming to Estes Park or Rocky National Park. I think the need and people who are staying there is about the same as it ever has been. And that being said, though, I don't feel they meet the community need or benefit. I don't think it's a change in circumstances. And the natural environment, I think that has already changed. And unless it keeps growing and developing lots more lots, I'm not so sure how it's going to be adverse effect. It's already kind of been a very long-term, 50-year neighborhood. I thought it was built out. Obviously, it's not. So I was kind of surprised to hear that. However, knowing that I still feel these don't meet their criteria, this neighborhood is overwhelmingly in favor of this. And obviously, by voting in favor of this, this is going to increase the number of short-term rentals in the Estes Valley, but it'll be contained inside this neighborhood, which is what I think they wanted. I'm really conflicted with this because I also want to listen to that small minority who really are not in favor of this, because I think their opinion matters as well. And so with that, I am conflicted about this. I'm not really comfortable that they have met all their criteria, but I am listening to the overwhelming support of the residents. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens, you're up.
Yeah, I support the rezoning. I understand some of Commissioner Shattuck McNally's hesitations, but I also know that this environment existed for 50 plus years. This neighborhood was sort of founded on the ability to have short-term rentals. It's something that people bought into when they bought into the neighborhood. And I think that that's why there's still overwhelming support for it. In creating the short-term rentals, we specifically created this zone because we knew that this was a community that felt very differently about short-term rentals than other communities might feel. And you've all benefited from it. You've talked about how you benefited. You talked about the cycle of, people coming in and renting and then buying and then renting again, but then eventually coming to live there. And it's an interesting concept. It's an interesting community in that way. And I think that that's why we felt, the need to create this zone in the first place, was because it is a sort of special and unique environment that you've created over the 50 plus years. So, I do think that it meets the needs. I think that some are not relevant in the case here, but I certainly think it's compatible with surrounding uses. It's a use that you've kind of, there again, had for these 50 years, so we're sort of returning that right back to you in a lot of ways, in my opinion. I think that the community need is maybe not in the larger community, but in your community, I feel like it is a need. It's something that people have come to appreciate, and that's the way you've been able to pass these homes on to your family members, and will so in the future. I do think there is a change in circumstance. I think there were two, actually. I think there was a change in circumstances in 2013 when there was a cap put on, and I think there was an additional change in circumstance when we created short-term rentals, different regulations for short-term rentals. It sounds like there's adequate infrastructure, no changes to the natural environment, than would normally be. So I feel like it does meet the criteria that's here. And, I just want to say that, and Commissioner Shattuck McNally said it too, we're not here, this is not a referendum on short-term rentals. People feel different ways about them. This is really an act of zoning. I think you meet the criteria. I would approve the zoning. I think that we created the zoning, like I said, and I think someone in the audience said this, if we don't meet the criteria for this zoning that was created for our neighborhood, then who might? And I mean, that was both humorous and true. So I support this. I hope that, I appreciate that everybody, I think, really was respectful tonight, and online was really respectful, because there are some differing opinions here. And I hope that the neighbors can resolve that with some of the neighbors that aren't in favor, and that will be conscious of those things that people brought up around noise. And sounds like you're regulating yourself on that. So I know in some of the short-term rental neighborhoods that we've required some sound devices that sort of kind of go off if people are abusing that and stuff. So that might be something you guys want to consider. But I guess I would just say, it seems like because of this interesting cycle that you have in this neighborhood, it does feel unlikely that maybe that you wouldn't ever go beyond this sort of 33% of people, and that you might even go, and you might even drop down as more people retire. And so I don't see, it doesn't appear that you'll have a situation where every single house becomes a short-term rental, just because you're all in these different phases of your life and you're kind of moving through. So anyway, I wish you luck. I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I too will support the rezoning application from the Wincliffe Estates Property Owners Association, and I'll attempt to offer my rationale as succinctly and clearly as I can. First of all, I want to express my appreciation to the 34 or so people that took the time, whether in person, traveling down from the mountain, to offer their public comments, and certainly the folks online. So a lot of gratitude to all of you that have engaged in this process. That helps inform our decision. It helps inform my decision. Secondly, taking into consideration the process that has gone on in last year, 2023, the fact that this was presented to the Estes Valley Planning Advisory Committee, and there were questions, there was public comment, and ultimately they voted unanimously to support the rezoning. With the Planning Commission, it was a little bit closer, but that's sometimes what happens when you have an even number of board members. But there was good deliberation, and so that is also part of my thinking. Ultimately, I think it's important for folks to understand that we have to do our best to base our decisions on the review criteria, and the five relevant review criteria. The growth management area one doesn't apply here, as was indicated in the staff report, but I believe that the five criteria have been met. Compatibility with surrounding uses. We've heard a lot and we've read a lot about the history of this rather unique community, that from its inception, it's part of the covenant, it's part of the original, at least going back 54 years. This was meant to include short-term rentals, part-time residents, full-time residents, and so I think it is compatible with that historical use, and therefore I believe that first review criterion is met. Community need or public benefit. I do believe there is public benefit. It was stated that a lot of the economy of the Estes Valley is based on tourism, and it's based on sales tax and lodging tax. And I think there are various economic analyses that show what the impacts are, what the contributions are from the whatever the percentage is of accommodations that occur in the valley that come from short-term rentals. So I think there is a benefit there. Some of that money, as has been stated, lodging tax goes to address needs such as childcare and affordable housing. And then I think there was maybe it was Robert or somebody. I thought it was a good point that, and perhaps in response to, those people who bought lots, they were going to build a house, and I can't imagine that's cheap to do, thinking that, sure thing, we'll get a short-term rental. But I think that this does benefit the community, not just the individual folks who are considering that option. And we have made clear tonight that just because if this rezoning occurs, people still have to go through the process. People still have to apply, and they have to meet all of the various requirements that, in terms of life safety, building codes, and certainly land use related issues. So I think number two is met. I agree with Commissioner Stevens' change of circumstances. I mean, this whole thing was, as far as I can tell, was driven by the updating of the land use code, which put in the 500-foot separator, as well as, the cap was in place before and after. And I think that's what drove this option to apply for a rezoning. And I think Windcliff is very unique. And that's all I'll have to say about that. And then 4 and 5, adequate infrastructure and the natural environment. Again, based on the historical use, the fact that there is good oversight, we haven't had complaints. People are very mindful. If you look at the operations manuals and all of those things regarding, being mindful of the environment and how to live in a sustainable in an intentional way, and then of course the infrastructure is there. So the criterion have been met. The public input has helped inform my decision, and therefore I'm fine with supporting the application, the rezoning. Commissioner, let's see, did you want to, and I'm sorry, did I jump ahead of you? I did not. So with that, we have a motion before us, approve, deny. I'm going to ask Commissioner Stevens to offer the motion to approve, and I think it was suggested by our county attorney. Is the reference in there to the reduction? Is that in there?
Yes, it's listed as one, but it should
Okay.
be item A.
And,
So
and also for the record, if we could make the spelling correction on item, the indented Windcliff. I believe there should be a D in there. So with that, Commissioner Stevens, would you offer the motion? There are two motions.
I would. My little TV isn't working, so
You want to,
I might, I'll try to read it from the screen. We'll see. It'll be a good eye test for me. I move that the Board of County Commissioners approve the proposed zoning amendments to the Larimer County zoning map, Estes Valley Planning Area, planning file number 23, zone 3562, to change the zoning designation of all property within Windcliff Estates. Oh, thank you.
I can make it smaller.
Within the Windcliff Estates from EVE1 Estes Valley Estate to EVE1S Estes Valley Estate short-term rental as proposed, subject to the following conditions. The short-term rental cap found in 13.6.1.C.4 of the Larimer County Land Use Code shall be reduced by the number of lawfully approved short-term rental in Windcliff Estates. And we can just add that, that's not a separate motion. And I move that the Board of County Commissioners certify the Larimer County zoning map, Estes Valley Planning Area as presented.
thank you, Commissioner.
Painful.
I believe that is a proper motion, and also that we've combined the two in one statement. So is there any further discussion, colleagues? Then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. At 9:31 PM, we are adjourned. Thank you all.